All right. All right. Welcome back, Dr. Brian Licuanan. I keep Licuanan.
That's correct.
All right, sweet. I've known you all these years, and I just keep screwing your last name up.
Got it right.
But you go by Eddie Bravo anyway. So
I go by Eddie Bravo anyway.
Anyway, so yeah, it all works out, man. So, hey, what's new? How have you been? I know you've been competing in jiu-jitsu. I need some jiu-jitsu updates.
Jiu-jitsu update since the last podcast was I competed in that tournament. Did pretty well. Got a silver medal there.
Sweet.
Yeah, and then competed in the open class. No one showed up. So I went ahead and collected my medal there.
They don't want the smoke, man. They don't want the smoke. That's what it is.
That's what it is. You say so. And then we had the LA Open, the IBJJF LA Open, the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation in LA recently. I took second there as well. But I did have a fight there, and I did take first in the open class. And
sweet.
Yeah, I fought a bigger guy, 200 heavyweight. So it was a tough match, but I came through.
Yeah, people don't really respect the like heavier guys. They don't understand how hard it is for a smaller person. You know, when you're at the same technical level or comparable, dude, 20, 30, 10 pounds, you could feel it.
Yeah, he was a 210-pounder, and for the first part of the match, it was a lot of stand-up, and then he got on top of me. I was able to get out, and I was able to get a full mount in a submission, so I was really happy about that one.
Oh, dude, that's see right there. Those are the best wins, right? The submission wins.
Yeah. So that was that. And then the Cal State Fullerton IBJJF Open, that was recent, and I had good luck there, and took first in my division, and then person signed up and didn't show up for the open class, so I collected my medal there.
Oh, sweet. Hey, it is. Listen, there's a guy named Mikey Gomez. He's a professor. He's now in Florida. He goes by, his name's Paraguay. No one knows him by Mikey Gomez. He's known by Paraguay, Professor Paraguay, because he's from Paraguay.
From Paraguay.
Yeah. And I remember I went to a tournament one time and no one showed up in my division. And he was like, but this is back in the day when there weren't a lot of jiu-jitsu people anyways. And he's like, dude, you trained, you bust your butt, take the medal. You know? He goes, it's if you were a pro fighter and your fighter didn't make weight or couldn't make it into the octagon because he's a cage fighter, he goes, you're getting paid, and that's your win. Like you win by default, but it's still yours. And I was like, oh, that's a good point. That's
true. Yeah, you're right. We train hard, and it's not our fault that someone doesn't sign up. But yeah, I really appreciate that. And I flew out to San Jose. I collected 2 medals there. No one signed up at all in my age division, and so.
Yeah. There's a guy at our gym. He's Filipino. He's smaller than me. He's a professor. He's a black belt. He comes from maybe Rancho Santa Margarita.
Okay.
With Kyron. Do you know what I'm talking about? I can't remember his name. He's a nurse.
Yes. Professor Jeff Elgato.
Yes, Jeff. He was telling me not only is he having he doesn't have a problem with people in his weight. It's very scarce. But his age division, he goes, there's never anyone. So he's starting to go down, but sometimes it's to the point where he has to go down and go against 18-year-olds or 19-year-olds. And he goes, it's brutal, dude, because he's fit in his 50s.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'll do it sometimes, but not all the time.
Not all the time, yeah.
It's not worth it.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation with that last week, actually, because he's actually competing. So this is the big tournament, the Long Beach Pyramid one for us, Masters International, and there's the big the World all next week. And so I was talking about that, and he's competing in this one. He said, yeah, there's no one in, he's a light feather, and he said there's really hard to find people in his division.
What weight is that, light feather?
Light feather, I know feather is up to 154, and then I'm not sure actually where light feather tails down to. I believe he said he's a light feather, either feather or light feather, but he just said that there's a lot of people not in his division. Because
I got about an extra 3 pounds on me right now. It goes right to my face and belly.
Yeah. And
I know that he and I are like around the same weight when I'm leaned out. Like, so, yeah, that's a light division. I've had people hip escape me off of them training because I'm just so light. They're just no gi. Yeah. I'll fly right off. Yeah. And I'm like, man, I almost feel like a child at this point.
Yeah. It's a lightweight, but they're quick, fast as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, interesting stuff, man. I had to bring you back on because I heard some great news that you've come out with a book.
That's correct.
Yes, and from what I understand, it's for sale everywhere, which is crazy too.
Yeah. The last time I was on your podcast, I was talking about that I had planned to release it, and it was in that process. So yeah, May 1st, 2024, this month, I released it, and it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and we have about 15 distributors out there.
Okay. All right. Well, you know what? Let's get into it, because I love psychology, as you know, spirituality, psychology. And if I correct me if I'm wrong, your book is about like getting someone help when those obstacles you face with trying to get someone help. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And so just to give your audience members a little bit of a background of what I do as a psychologist, I see a lot of clients across California with varying levels of struggles with mental health conditions, a lot with substance use disorder, and I also volunteer for the National Alliance of Mental Illness, helping families who have loved ones struggling with mental health or substance use disorders. And a lot of times that these families come is that their loved one doesn't want to get help. They don't think they have a problem. They don't think they have an issue. They think they can manage their substances, and families are really, really stuck. And so what I had found is that a lot of these families I worked with, whether it be in a treatment facility, whether it be in these groups that I facilitate, a lot of these questions that they had were very identical, and my interventions were identical. And so I decided that I probably need to put this in some type of manual or strategy guide. And I was asking a lot of these family members and that I work with, I said, is there anything out there that you know of how to get unstuck and get their family members help? And they said, there's nothing out there. And so I decided during the pandemic to start writing this book, a strategy guide to basically help families who feel helpless, they're stuck with fear, and don't know what to do. And so it's a strategy guide and knowledges to help them get their loved one to a place where their only option is to get help or to get into treatment. Okay.
Do you know what? I think that is absolutely true. Myself, I've never had I guess I consider myself low-key addicted to food, or whatever else. But I've had that up close and personal with my son. My son is a former, I guess, is the right word addict? I don't know the words. The words evolve all the time. Is that right, addict?
Well, we can, but usually is a substance use disorder, but addiction is a wide general word. But there's all kinds of
okay. I'll say junkie. I'm kidding. But yeah, so my son had substance abuse disorder, and I remember clearly thinking, what do I do? Because there isn't any information, and the only information you could get is from asking other people who are not in your situation, or someone who's been in a kind of a quasi similar situation. But it's not unique to yours, So it might be like a general thing, like, you know what, just tough love them, tough love them, and the tough love didn't work. It worked a little bit, it worked in certain parts, but it'd be good to know more than just and what does tough love mean? Like you need more than that, and it was hard to I didn't know how to organize a strategy to do that. We just would have a family get together. We did an intervention, and the intervention didn't work. Well, I don't know. With substance abuse, this is from my experience. Is that there was an intervention when we did an intervention with my son. All he did was lie. He goes, yeah, no, it's wrong, and I don't even like it. It was just like this. He was pacifying us. I don't know if that's the right word, pacifying us by just saying, yeah, no, you guys are right. You're right. Yeah. I don't like cocaine. I just like how it smells, it just whatever. And I'm going to stop. You guys are right. And walk out and continue, just no problem. And we're like, what do we do? And it got to the point where he's not going to live long. The abuse got that bad. And so it would be, this is good. This is you should have called this the Addiction Recovery Bible. You know what I'm saying? People could use this as a reference, like the Bible, like sections to go into to learn how to do that. So just to jump right into it, because this is definitely something that has piqued my interest. For people listening, what is, like, let's just go by, I don't want to jump to the end, the beginning. Once you realize your loved one has a substance abuse issue, what is the first thing that would you recommend they should do?
Well, you said a lot of good points. If I can touch upon some of those points, is you use the words tough love and so forth. And so one of the things when I approach this book, a lot of it also in terms of just knowledge and skills, a lot of it is this clarification of concepts that are out there. Like the concept of tough love is actually a powerful concept. Sometimes people misinterpret it. It's one thing I write about in my book is family members can interpret tough love as tough luck, meaning that, hey, we're done with you. We don't want anything to do with you. Get help, and then maybe we'll have something to do with you.
That's what I thought it meant.
There you go. And that's what I get a lot of family members. And I'm maybe talk a little bit about later, but rock bottom. Rock bottom is a well-meaning terminology, but you get a lot of family members who misinterpret that as well because everyone's rock bottom can be very different. And so that's a lot of what I do as well. There's a lot of these misinterpretations. I also talk about enabling, right? We hear about enabling, and I literally talk about that enabling is not a curse word because sometimes family members will look at that as a curse word. It's more of a shame that, oh my God, you're enabling the person. But enabling comes from a place of love, right? That's what we do as family members, like with your son, is when he doesn't have any food, you make sure you get him some nourishment. Right? If he's homeless and wandering the street, you make sure you want to have shelter, whether it be a hotel room, whether it be in the garage. And what enabling does, however, is it perpetuates the problem, right? And so,
yes.
Yeah, and so one of the analogies I like to use is someone got into 3 DUIs and got their car taken away from them, but yet you supply them with Uber rides and so forth. Where's the motivation to maybe get sober or healthy?
There's no consequence.
Yes. And that's what I want to talk about too, is that your son, not knowing your son or where those dynamics were, is one of the concepts I talk about in my book. Is the reason why people can continue to struggle on a chronic, meaning long-term level, is because they can, right? Is because your son can go in there and say, yeah, I'm good, and pacify, but there's no implications or consequences to that. And so what I teach family members is to come from a loving place, say, hey, we're always going to love and care for you. We just aren't going to willing to support this unhealthy lifestyle any longer. And so rock bottom to me, the way I interpret it, the way I work with families, the terminology I use is a point of desperation. So a point of desperation is when we are at a point where pretty significant consequences can happen. If we haven't eaten for a long period of time, we're going to eat anything, near anything to survive.
The hierarchy of needs start kicking in.
The hierarchy of needs coming in. That's exactly what I do is I put these loved ones who are struggling to a place where those basic needs, if they don't get those basic needs, then they're going to be in their fight, or flight. And so to fight, meaning, hey, I want to get better. I want to get over my substance use disorder, or they freeze. I don't know what to do. I'm paralyzed. Those are actually good positions to be in if they're going to fight or you're freeze. Because if you're freeze, you're more likely to be open to direction. I want this pain to go away. Sometimes people have fight in them, and I call that gas in their tank, is sometimes they're not done. And there's nothing the family unit can do until we set them up or they run out of gas in their tank. And so that's kind of what happened. Is the reason why your son can do that, like I said, is because he can. There are no implications or consequences for that.
I would like to add, you're absolutely 100% correct on that. And you should be a psychic.
Psychic?
Yeah. You could read my further into it, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But here's the nuance of it. My son was enabled, and I know at the beginning my enabling was the naive blindness that a parent gets through love. Like you give your kid the benefit of doubt, or maybe it's that I don't want this to be true. Like you might hear a rumor and you confront them and they're like, no. And you're seeing that little 6-year-old that believe, love that would ask you questions like, have you ever been to the moon, Dad? And just this little, you go there. But the thing is, this is the problem we have faced, is that we couldn't get the whole family on board.
Okay.
My side of the family has addiction like crazy. So all of us were like, that's a hard stop. When we found out for sure he was on drugs, it's a stop. He had 2 holdouts. He had the grandmother on his mom's biological side and his mom. But he actually wore his mom out, where she says it's too much. And then the grandmother, there is no wrong he could do in her eyes. He could literally be loaded at her house and do whatever he wants, and there was a problem. And that was where the problem lied.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And that's exactly one of the common things too on the family unit is I tell people that getting help or treatment's the formal process of getting help, and treatment can look different across all different type of approaches or modalities. But let's just look at, for right now, treatment as some form of help for getting someone. And I said treatment absolutely works as long as everyone's doing their part. Okay, and so one of the analogies, I'm a big person on metaphors, and I like to use a boat as an analogy for that intimate family unit that's involved in that initial treatment process. Usually these are parents, maybe grandparents, maybe some siblings involved. And those are the people on that boat, including your loved one struggling, are the people who absolutely are willing to go through this process. And for example, if you have a boat of 5 people, no matter how you got here, they have to assume 25% responsibility. 20% responsibility if there's 5 people, and they have to work 100% on their 20%. Right? If your grandmother was on that boat, she would have to work 100% on her 20% share, meaning that enabling part or that denial and all that stuff. And your son would have to work, 100% on his 20%, whatever that is, traumas, his substance use disorder, because everyone in that family unit on some level contributed. There's a saying, no one caused it, can't cure it, can't control it, but you perpetuate it in some form or fashion. And if grandma, the way I'd work with your family, if grandma is not willing to hold that, she cannot be part, at least in that initial part of that boat per se, in that treatment process, because she is going to be a major factor, a risk factor in your son getting that help that he needs. And maybe she can be part of the process later on. And so that's exactly, that intervention part. And then, fear and guilt are all legitimate emotions, but those are I call it the oil and gas to why people don't step up or don't put themselves in a position to get their loved one the help that they need. Well, he may die, right? And that's legitimate valor. He might take his life or hurt somebody else. And so the longer they stay in that unhealthy state, the harder it is to break free from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just know, I think that what you're saying it's from someone who's been through it. Absolutely. What you're saying is golden. The problem is that person, the addict, within the let's say the family's a wall to prevent them from further destruction. They find that weak link, and they freaking lean in on it pretty hard. So we just couldn't control the grandmother. So
yeah, and that's a tough one. And usually you find that with grandparents. Sometimes I get a lot of grandparents you reach that point where some of the best words I've ever heard from a family unit saying, "We're done." Not "we're done loving you, we're just done supporting this lifestyle." That's what kind of your wife said, or his mom said, is, "I'm done. I can't do this anymore because I'm doing more harm than good in this." And grandmother, I don't know the dynamic with his grandma, but when she reached that point where I'm doing more harm than good, then that's the realization that they need. But I could only assume that there's maybe some type of guilt and fear that grandma was harboring, which prevented her from taking that step.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. It's just, that's her tendency. If you look at her own kids, it's just some people are just enablers, and for whatever reason, I don't know what the psychological profile of. I obviously I can armchair it, but it's not. Like how we're creatures of habit, so they don't do things just once. It's usually if you see a behavior expressed in a person, it's something they've done previously. And so with enabling, it's something that she has done with across the board to everyone in her life. She's almost like I would say like a pushover, for the lack of a better term, which is, it's a good thing to be a nice person, but it's to the extreme. There's not balance there. But at the end of the day, it's not her fault, and that's the other part too. Like me as a parent, I believe that that God has given my son to me, and he's my responsibility, and I take ownership of everything that has gone wrong with him. I mean, and to a certain point, like as an adult now, he's approaching 30. And he's making decisions as a grown man. Well, I mean, as much as he can. He has a medical situation. But when he was younger like that, I took full responsibility. Like, okay, well, as much as I could. I took absolute responsibility for that. So with that said, you identify, if you identify someone as a family member's has a substance abuse issue, what should be done? Should there be like a family meeting? Do you like, what do you do? Confront the person? Because my immediate reaction was anger, and I confronted, and the response I got were just lies. But I believed the lies. Like, oh, no, you're right. I was just experimenting. It's just a phase. I'm not going to do it again. They just wanted me out. But the interesting thing is, my sister-in-law has been very open about this. She's a former substance abuse recovery person. Not former, she is, and hasn't abused substances since she was probably 18 years old, like at a young age. When my family had like an intervention and talked to him, and he was doing that, she goes, he's lying. She could see it.
She could see it.
No one else could see it. She goes, no. I've been there. I know what he's doing. He's lying. And he hasn't reached a point where he feels forced or in a position where he has no other options. So
what you would do up front is there's different avenues. So one thing I want to be very clear is there's never one right approach. It all depends on the person, the family dynamics, cultural issues. So there's not one dynamic. But I typically, what I find a lot is that families aren't talking as much, right? We make these assumptions. We don't validate the person. Validate meaning to acknowledge their truth. Doesn't mean you have to agree or believe it, but you validate their truth. So for something like your son is to sit down and say, hey, I noticed that, how's everything going with you, right? Just know that, you can always open to talk to me. I'm a little concerned about you because I'm noticing some changes in you. And what some of these changes are, you're not sleeping as well, or you're a little bit more irritable and patient. Tell me what's going on. Is there anything that I could be of help? Is there anything that I can help support you with? Just planting those seeds. I call them planting emotional seeds, because a lot of people don't want to ask for help because whether it's real or imagined, they feel shameful, they feel guilty, they feel scared. And sometimes there's that bridge. And like, you have a very natural reaction of being angry, right? You should be angry. And from there, we find a lot of more disconnect. So acknowledging the person and letting them know that I'm here to support you and that there is a healthy dialogue that can take place. You can have healthy dialogue, but doesn't mean we still can't have healthy boundaries and limits. And that's where validation comes in. I believe validation is probably the most powerful tool in getting past what I call the first base of miscommunication or communication. Is because whenever I have more than one person come into therapy, most of the time the issues are, well, this person's not hearing me, this person's not hearing me. So validation means I'm just going to acknowledge and accept your truth, but doesn't that mean I have to agree or believe it? For example, your son, I'd say, like, hey, so yeah, you use cocaine, you're experimenting. I noticed that. What does that do for you? Right? Is it, help me understand why that's important for you, rather than, darn it, you used and so forth, you lied to me, which is a valid emotion. But what happens is we miss the whole nuance of a healthy dialogue taking place. That's why I find a lot of people on the parent level with the child level or what have you, is the emotions get in the way and we don't provide a nice avenue for healthy dialogue. But just planting those emotional seeds doesn't mean there's just going to be change that can take place. Maybe one day that seed will germinate to a point like, wow, maybe I need time to talk to my dad. Or maybe, hey, I could tell my dad that, hey, I could use some therapy. Or maybe I need to go into treatment. So that's one of the biggest things that I think, and be vigilant with your loved ones. So substance use, be vigilant, especially for sudden changes. Like I said, mentioned earlier, sleep patterns, dress, mood switch changes. They're either staying up all night. So be mindful of those, because your child best.
Yeah, that's actually the way I caught my son was it was interesting. He was I noticed there was changes in his behavior, like you said, and the mood swings, but they would be like it could happen. A mood swing could happen during a car ride. Like it could be from just chilling to irritated, but we hadn't even conversed. We're just sitting there and he's irritated. And I thought, well, maybe it's hormones. But then, I've been around drugs a lot when I was younger, and my gut started telling me something's reminds me of this. And it went against all my logical mind of, no, my son, he wouldn't do. We talk a lot. We've had the sex talk. We've talked raw about a lot of things, even drugs. And I don't think he would lie to me. But then finally one day, something happened and he had to go to the hospital. He was sick. And the doctor goes, yeah, well, we think it's this, this, and this. And I go, drug test him. And the doctor was like, drug test him? And my son had his eyes got real big. I said it right in front of him. And he was like, well, I started studying my son. And he was only like 15 at the 15 and a half. And the doctor goes, hey, do you mind if I talk to him privately and this and that? Then he kind of under his breath goes, I'll tell you what he says later. I'll tell you what he says later. I said, sure, yeah. And he came and goes, your son's using drugs.
Yeah.
And he's scared to get tested, but I'm going to test him. But I just wanted to try to make a safe place for him to give an opportunity to confess as opposed for her, because the test is going to get done. We already drew the blood. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And that's a common barrier to when I work with a lot of families is there's that we don't want to believe that. That's our young child. Exactly that. That's our young child, a young daughter. They're innocent. That can't be them. Their parent was an addict and no way they would do it, or were very spiritual and no way that would go against the beliefs. And we don't want to also jump to conclusions that all of a sudden their behavioral changes. It's especially for teens, it's really difficult, right? There's hormonal changes for females. There's, the menstrual cycles, which has a really, really impact on mood. And
life.
And for even young males, they're going through this very sensitive period in life, which is identity formation. So there's all those different changes taking place as well. But it's important to put that on the radar as an option, okay? Especially nowadays, the accessibility, as you know, of substances. You can literally order online edibles online, vaping pens, the level, you can order fentanyl online. It's very, very accessible. There's no screening. And it's a really, really big problem. So I'm not saying jump to conclusion they're using drugs, but know that it put that on the radar as a possibility.
Well, yeah. Well, in my case, was the upsetting. I'm just kind of not making this about you, me. This is your book, but I'm just kind of relating my story to your book and process. My son was actually getting the drugs from his girlfriend's parents. His girlfriend, her parents were. Her dad is his girlfriend's dad is a former professional athlete. They have a lot of money, and they feel that nothing bad could happen to them. They're, these bougie people think that, and they even taught their daughter how to have enough cocaine to travel on a plane, where to put it and stuff like that. And my son learned from them. And this is when he was actually in rehab. And he kind of, you kind of have that come to Jesus moment and open up about everything. And I was like, man, by this point, this guy, he's actually moved out of state. The family's moved. But I was like, I'd go and punch him in the face for that, man. That is so toxic or wrong to do to someone else's kid, because they're like, no, they're the ones who actually introduced, goes, no, it's safe. We're going to watch you. We'd rather you do it with us. We know how to do it. And they taught him. And these are, parents, high school parents, fellow. So yeah, it sucked pretty bad. Yeah. But going back to the thing of addiction, what do you think about personalities? Because I think my son's personality didn't help, because, some people are introverts, some are extroverts. Some people kind of have maybe a personality disorder going into addiction. Say if someone's like here's two contrasts. The reason why I asked this question, and it'll probably resonate with some people, is that I have a lot of drug addicts in my family, but I'll use my cousin. We'll call her Jay. All right.
Okay.
I actually have a few whose names start with J. So, and her name really starts with J. I don't know why I said that, but I'm gonna stick with it now. And then say my son. My son kind of always had a smug attitude, not towards family, but towards others. Even in jiu-jitsu tournaments, he had a smug attitude. Like when he would lose, sometimes I'm like, good, I'm glad he lost. He needs to lose because he's arrogant. He just, it's almost a narcissistic, or not that people do that around too much. A very, well, I would say narcissism, maybe on the spectrum of narcissism. And when he began abusing drugs, that personality trait exploded. He wants everyone to know he does drugs. He'll send you a video of him doing drugs to throw it in your face after you told him not to do drugs. Like, it got so flagrant. Now, I have another cousin who's my age. I have a cousin who's my age, Jay. She's older than me by about 8 years, actually. So she's way older than me. She's been doing drugs since she was in high school. Hard drugs, meth, whole thing. She's never been that way. She's the kind of person like, man, I wish I could find a way to quit, but just can't. Just the battles within. It seems like she's easier to talk to and to try to work with, as opposed to someone who's just like, Barack Obama tried cocaine, blah, blah, blah. Like, just this arrogance to it. Do you think that personality plays a role in that? Or how could parents or people, not even parents, it could be maybe someone's doing it for their spouse. How do you navigate the personality?
Yeah. Well, in terms of, is there certain personalities that lend someone to be have a higher propensity for using substances? Maybe some personality disorders. Real quickly, personality is a stable trait. Usually personality, generally speaking, is kind of solidifies about 12, 13 years of age. And there's hereditary components to it. But personality can also definitely be formed through the environment you are in. And there's different personality disorders that we have. You mentioned, where do you fall on the extrovert introversion scale? Yeah, that's a personality that's pretty solidified at some point in age. Can that change somewhat under circumstances? Yes. And then there's things like need for achievement. There's openness to direction. There's neuroticism, which has the umbrella of things like anxiety and stuff like that. But are there some personalities? Probably, definitely maybe some personality disorders that can lend itself more to others. But a lot of times, I think a lot would be the environment, right? Like your son's girlfriend's parents. Doesn't matter what personality someone has. If they're in an environment that substantiates and accessibility and stuff like that, that is heavily weighted. So I think a lot of it is the environment you're in. And if someone does have some struggles or risk factors could be loose attachments in the home, not many role models, parental figures, high stress levels at the house. There's not many healthy communication patterns. There's neglect. So I think more that can lend itself to certain personality conditions. But in terms of, is there one personality, is one extrovert going to be a higher propensity to be struggle with addiction than an introvert? Not necessarily. An introvert, is going to be by themselves, gets their energy from within. They could use drugs by themselves. An extrovert, yes, you can say, wow, they're out about, they're like around people, so accessibility. So I don't think there's any really, really hardcore definitive answers to one personality over the other. Maybe some personality disorders, but I would say a lot of the risk factors to look at really have a big are good indicators if someone's going to be subjected or a high risk for substance use.
Yeah, no, not necessarily. Very good points. Thank you for sharing that. It's not the propensity for addiction. In regards to personality, I'm to clarify, I'm asking in the process of trying to get them in the help. Oh. How do you navigate a arrogant drug user as opposed to the one who's like, I need to stop, I just can't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I would say with that, yes, I guess there's some personalities that can maybe be a little bit more challenging and difficult. for example, you mentioned the narcissistic personality disorder, and I'm glad you mentioned that term is used very loosely, and it's kind of being a challenge. And that's why we're trying to educate people about what that is. Because narcissistic personality disorder means this a high level of self-importance. Sometimes they struggle with empathy, disregard for rules as well at some level, and struggles with moral judgment and so forth. And when someone's just taking care of their own needs, oh, that person's a narcissist. And so we have to be very mindful of terminologies like that.
Yes.
And so, but yeah, I would imagine there's certain personalities that people would be more deflective of wanting to get help. You're right. Arrogance could be one of those things that I could do no wrong, or I could figure this thing on my own.
Hey, leave P. Diddy out of this. I was kidding. Sorry. Had to throw it in. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I could see that, high need for achievement. I could imagine that could be a protective factor from someone if they want to achieve and they're not being able to do that because they have a struggle. I could see something like that as being more open to that, openness to direction and new ideas. I could imagine that as being a positive thing for change. So in that regard, yes. Okay.
All right. So once we identify the family member as a user or a substance has an issue with substances, whether it's a child, a spouse. Do you know what's crazy on a side note? I actually was in a long-term. I was married when I was married 14 years. I didn't know for the longest time that my that my ex, she was like addicted to porn real hard. I didn't know that. And the way I found out was that here's a roundabout way I found out. I spent I think like a month at my in-laws' house. So both of us had to spend a month there. My in-laws' computer stopped working. But I was working all day. My ex wasn't working. I think she was in summer school. And she just, took local classes at the local place. And so her brother is a computer engineer. And so he came to fix the computer. But I didn't, I'm not thinking anything. I'm coming home and I'm just whatever. And they have a very conservative Christian household. And so the mother was talking to me about, I know this guy that we're all praying for him at church. He lives somewhere else. He secretly looks at porn and they think it's me, right? But I didn't make the connection. I was like, well, hey, you should pray for that dude, man. I don't even got time for that crap, right? Yeah. But I didn't say that. But I'm thinking you should pray for it, of course. And they're hinting of trying to get me. Sometimes they should give that issue to God. And I'm like, yeah. Of course, give it to God. And I didn't find out for like 2 years that they all thought it was me until one day my brother-in-law, his wife, he's married. His wife told me about the porn found in the computer, and I go, that wasn't me. And then I actually confronted I said that was my her name, Jane Doe. That had to have been Jane Doe because my mother-in-law and I, we were at work all day. Like, there's no way. And then afterwards, I'd go to the gym or do whatever. There's no way I could have done that. And she was just sitting there. I said, damn, she jammed up the whole computer. They go, dude, it was loaded with just all kinds of stuff. And I confronted her about it. She was like, yeah, I don't do that anymore.
Well, she admitted, though.
Yeah, she admitted it. And she had no choice.
Yeah.
But I was like, dude, your whole family thinks I'm this perv, man. Like, but I was like, just let it be. I'm not even going to...
You didn't clarify?
No, because it's their daughter. I'm going to say, no, your daughter's the one who's looking at, cheeks getting clapped. So, but long story short, even someone that close to me, I had no idea. But she told me she couldn't help. She would look at it all day.
Yeah.
All day, dude. Like right when I would leave, she told me until I came home. All day. And I'm like, dude, that's like at least 10 hours during that summer.
Could be.
So going back to addiction... I'm just saying that to say this. Don't beat yourself up. The person shouldn't beat themselves up if they don't catch it, because that can happen. Like you might be doing life.
Well, that's one of the symptoms of an addiction. People keep engaging in the behavior when they know it's unhealthy, but they can't stop doing it. So they repeatedly keep doing it as well. And so a lot of times it's in deceptive means, right? When drinking by yourself, pornography, gambling on your own. And so I believe lot of these mental health conditions to level degrees, a disease of isolation, meaning that that's where it thrives, right? Usually with people in depression aren't hanging around with a bunch of optimistic people. They're usually isolating themselves, or social anxiety and drug addiction. Yeah, they may be connected with some people, going out and so forth, but a lot of times their high level addiction or substance use or whatever their addiction may be is usually in isolation. And that's where one of the things I talk about in a strong recovery program, which is just a healthier plan for better living, are things like accountability in place, healthy fellowship. That's why so those are really, really protective factors, because like I said, this disease, which I also brought in general terms, is just any entity that causes impairment in your life, and that's been chronic. And we all have, so I always talk about is we have this, all of our version of our own disease, right? Yes, there's a mental health condition, there's a heart condition, there's a substance use disorder, but things like jealousy can be your disease if it causes problems in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I talk about one of the 7 deadly sins: greed, envy, pride. All those can be your disease. And so those aren't an actual diagnosis of some sort. So we all have a version of disease. And so we also have our own version of a recovery. And so, but yeah, and that disease, it thrives on things like guilt and fear and isolation. And that's where I come in and sort of mitigate those symptoms on what the individual can do and on the family level can do as well.
Yeah. It's. I wish they would teach this stuff when we were kids. Like, kind of at least give us an intro or some idea of this is. Like, I'm talking high school, at least, when you're starting to form stronger interpersonal bonds.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like we learn this through trial and error as an adult, and it's bad. Like, it's not good.
And speaking with adults too, is what happens is that even adults have these certain belief systems that were hammered into them at a young age, because I believe there's a sensitive period in one's life, and that's childhood and adolescence. That's where a lot of imprinting takes place. And you see these adults way into their middle age, but they're still have these very strong belief systems because that they were surrounded with. And so the education level is not just for the young kids, it's for adults and parents as well, is because what happens is generationally they've carried on that belief system. Their sense of values and morals have been so imprinted for a long time. And yes, sometimes people can break out of it and educate themselves. But a lot of those really idiosyncratic, those little just behaviors that people engage in, those were imprinted in a product of their past experiences growing up, right? But yeah, education, I believe, is the first line of defense in anything. And but I'm absolutely correct in terms of having those type of education in the school systems, family relationships, attachments, traumas, I think are really, really important to have. So I think you brought a good point.
Well, one thing too about addiction, before we go on to the further steps of discussing your book, one thing that I found hard was dealing with the lying. Like, I took it so personal, and it was almost to the point where I had to go through this, I don't want to call it the phases of grief, but I went through this phase where, because the lying was continuous, lips moving, they're lying, right? So I'm talking about an addict, a substance abuse person. I'm just trying to be, I don't want to offend someone, but isn't that crazy, the world we live in? I got to be careful. Addict's still legit, right? Or no? Is that 2023? Is it not?
Well, people still refer. I don't particularly like. I believe no one's ever died. They're never defined by a diagnosis or something. And so, like, I'm an addict. We don't go around saying I'm diabetes, right? Or I'm hypertension. Oh, I struggle with that, and so struggling with addiction is a footnote in someone's life. It's a footnote of struggle. It's a big footnote. But I personally don't like when someone says, I am schizophrenic, I am bipolar. No, I'm an individual. This is who I am. I struggle with bipolarity or schizophrenia.
That's actually a good way of looking at it. Yeah, because it doesn't, in a positive side, I don't identify with my occupation. Because some people go, well, I'm a mom. Mm-hmm. And if something happens that displaces me from being a mom, that's a weird statement because I'm a guy, but I'm saying if someone says I'm a mom, it seems like they're lost. Or if I'm a police officer and this is what I do, and if they get terminated from that job, it's like their identity's gone.
And you see that a lot with competitive athletes, especially high-level people who train for the Olympics. They've been training for Olympics at a very, very young age, competition, and all of that has been such a big part of their lifestyle. And then that's where you see a lot of sometimes these high-level competitive athletes, when they're no longer competing, they get injured, they go through a level of grief and loss, and sometimes depression. Sometimes they could be prone to substance use, and so anything they're engaging in. So when it becomes, it's a part of your identity, but should not be the sole part of your identity. Yes. And that's why it's so important for people to have some level of other areas of their life where they thrive in, whether it be on their spiritual level, on a family level, individual levels. Self-growth is this dynamic process of redefining ourselves. And that's what happens a lot in careers. That's why a lot of people in professions, when they retire, it's a big, big struggle for them. I've literally had people who come out of retirement because they struggle with what their identity is. And you see a lot of parents when their kids leave the nest, so to speak, because they go to college. It's like, my gosh, for 18 years, I've been this parent and doing everything with these kids, and who am I? And sometimes you see that if people in marriages, like, oh my God, who are you? And because they stop dating each other, they stop nurturing the relationship. And so it's really, really important to do that and not be so fully invested and identify solely as that. And, so.
You know what? I know this has nothing to do with addiction, but I just like how you just said a couple stops dating each other. You must always date each other. That's deep, dude. Mm-hmm. I think that's how you keep the flame going. You remind yourself, I need to show up every day to this relationship and keep that energy.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely with the relationship, keep dating each other, and that's even with parent-child relationship, even a friendship, right? And one of the positive benefits of social media is it makes it so much easier to maintain these relationships, right? By connecting with each other as well. That's a silver lining in it. But yes, relationships need nurturing; they need attending to. That's where you see a lot of people where relationships go stagnant as they stop nurturing that, and dating is one way to do it. Let's go on a date. Let's go. My wife and I, right, our kind of our date is our Sunday morning jujitsu, because
and it's your addiction. It's like a twofer. No, I'm kidding.
No, it's yeah, exactly, and it's a great way for us to connect and spend time. And so it doesn't have to be anything grand, but a shared activity is how you can nurture that relationship.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, that just caught me there because relationships and things have been on my mind a lot lately. And at some point in this conversation, I want to bring up relationships and addiction, because I'll explain that later. But I just wanted to point that out. That's actually a very good way of looking at things. You can't forget to keep dating. You can't neglect that. Even if you're in a long-term relationship, you keep dating that person. That is so deep, dude. That's blowing my mind right now.
Yeah.
So where were we with addiction? So once we identify the person has addiction, and we decide something needs to be done about this behavior is destructive, absolutely destructive. Then what? Like what do we do?
Well, there are different phases. Where I focus in on are what I call people in crisis. Right, crisis is essentially meaning that if change doesn't happen sooner or later, something bad's going to happen.
Yes,
that person's going to harm themselves, lose their life, harm someone else, put themselves in a situation where it's really, really bad. And so that's where I find a lot of where people struggling and where there was a gap in knowledge is they're in that crisis mode and they become paralyzed. We don't know what to do anymore. We're scared. And then what happens is everything deteriorates and the person, continues to suffer or something really bad happens. But early in those stages, there's different levels of struggle. There could be a mild level of struggle. There could be a moderate, and then there's a severe level of struggle, and then you hit in the crisis level mode. But I think if you're having someone with struggle, I think having a conversation early on, I'm really big on identifying behaviors, and rather than giving labels like, hey, you're really disrespectful, or you've been really lazy. You're really lazy. Those are triggers, and when we refer to giving people labels, but saying, hey, I've really noticed that you don't sit around with us as much as dinner time, or I notice when I try to talk to you, you try to avoid me. I kind of feel kind of disconnected from you, right? I'd like to reconnect with you. How can we do that? So identify behavior, how it makes you feel, and what you're asking to request from. So that's usually people in a mild level of struggle. But when people are on that high level of crisis, you have a conversation is that we're really concerned about you and we want to help and support you. And these are some of the things that we'd like to see from you. And then there's different levels to which you do that to, I call it like a third try, where whatever consequences you are going to or boundaries you're going to set, that this is it. Let's say your third time with your son is he's still testing positive for some substances or he's not getting any help, saying, hey, we're not going to support you any longer. We've talked to you already and we can't support you. You no longer are going to be able to live here. And those are the level of consequences we need and point of desperation. So, and one thing that's important as well is people who are forced to get help can be just as successful as people who are motivated, is because there's a level of window where of unhealthiness when they get maybe abstinent from substances, maybe they eat better, they are on medication and so forth, where they all of a sudden become motivated. They have these insights, but that's what people sometimes don't realize is they think everyone that wants help has to be completely motivated to get help. No, they have to take some action, but they don't have to be completely on board, bags packed, I'm ready to change, save me. That helps, but people who are forced in a position can usually also break free from that. And I see that a lot of times. I get people early on in treatment say, I never want to get better. I'm never going to get sober. I hate my family. I'm never going to love my family. That's the disease talking. And then as they get healthier, I've seen family relationships really bond. I always tell that the disease can fracture families, but through getting help in the treatment process, recovery process, I've seen very estranged families come together, even in a closer way when everyone's doing their part, because they're being honest, they're recognizing their part, they're working on their healthier selves and through that recovery process. So
is it true if, I know there's nothing in the world that's 100%, so I'm just asking general question, like generally true. Mm-hmm. Is it generally true, like say if I was a heroin addict, had abuse issue with heroin, and I recovered. The rest of my life, I'm gonna be weak to heroin. You know, people go, man, you're an addict your whole life. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
My belief system is yes. There's a saying that your disease, that entity that you've struggled with a long time, right, chronic long time, they say it's always going to be in the corner doing push-ups or squats, whatever you want to say, or
in the bullpen warming up for you,
or triangle warm-ups, or whatever you want to say, meaning that it's always going to be somewhere on the radar, and we have to respect its capabilities, right? And does that, because if it's
that's scary, man.
Well, that's the way it is, because we have to respect. And and one of the analogies I like to use is things like for hypertension, right? I may have used this analogy last time, but someone goes to the doctor and let's say they're smoking cigarettes and the doctor says, yeah, you're hypertensive, your blood pressure is 160 over 100, right? Uh-huh. Okay, so let's change our diet. Let's lessen our salt intake. Let's cut out the pretzels. Let's cut down smoking. Let's do meditation techniques to lower your stress levels. You come back 5 months later and your blood pressure normalizes to like 125 over 75. Does that mean that person can go back to that old lifestyle? Not if they want to get better. It's always going to be some type of a challenge for them, but it's not going to be up front. It's going to be in the corner. And so they have to respect its capabilities. That's with anything that we've struggled for a long time. The reality is if people struggled with chronic anxiety, chronic depression, or substance abuse, it's somewhere there on the radar, but it's hopefully in the periphery, but we always have to respect its potential capabilities. And especially with high-level substance use, that's just my reality, that's where people who think like, well, I think after a while, I've been sober for 10 years, I could drink a little alcohol. Some people can believe that. It's called harm reduction, where they can get back to that lifestyle. My belief in the vast number of clients I've worked with is managing it is your high risk factor for getting back to that old place is very likely, right?
You're playing with fire.
You are, right? Like, yeah, I could just use a little heroin, a little opiates here and there.
A little bump of cocaine. I mean,
yeah.
It's like coffee.
So I know it's kind of disheartening for you to think that But like I said, we have to respect his capabilities.
Yeah, no, it's just scary because, I mean, well, two things. One is, a few things. It's weird, like you're touching on things about me. I don't know if they're universal, like say hypertension, blood pressure. I have that. I'm very sensitive to salt. So I like, seriously, if I go out to eat with you today, like even now, I'm bloated from salt right now. From, like I'm going to go hit the sauna later today. My face leans out. And it'll be lean out for a few days until I could just eat Chipotle. I will swell. Like I hold salt crazy, but it's because of hypertension or the predisposition to it or whatever. But so when you're seeing all these things, I'm like, man, this guy, I think you've been looking through my window, man. And
I read your book.
Yes. But here's a weird thing. I don't know, as a mental health professional, are you allowed to talk about your personal beliefs, like say spiritual things?
You absolutely can.
Okay,
but you can on some level, but for us, you have to be mindful as a clinician as well, especially if your beliefs are going to not have a positive impact on your clients as well. But
okay, yeah. So I mean, well, this is what I was thinking, and this has to do with like a vice. Vice is addiction, is it? Same thing?
Can be. It can be a form of it.
One thing I noticed, like for me, one of my vices that I've had through my life, like it probably started when I was 13, actually. I don't know exactly when it started. And it's just women. It's women.
Okay.
And not just a normal type of woman. Like I'm not like this anymore. Do a lot of soul searching, in the last few years. I've been doing a lot of soul searching and changed, and through the grace of God, I've been changed. I'm not like this, but through my adult life, I wasn't just attracted to women. It was a certain type of woman, and you know what? A whore. I was completely attracted to slutty women, right? Or whores, whatever you want to call it, women of the night, and because they would do the things that I'd like.
Okay,
right now. Which led to the vice, because it was like a cycle. Like they would do the weird Rick James things I had in the back of my head I'd want to do. They would do all those things. But it's weird is that we would like magnets, like laws of attraction, find each other. I could be anywhere. I could be at Irvine and at the gym, and there's 700 students there. We will find each other quick. Out of all the people, it would just draw in. And now I know I believe spiritually there's something going on there, spiritual warfare, and that it's not a coincidence. Same thing, good thing, people come together for good is not a coincidence. People coming together for bad isn't a coincidence. But I've noticed that like it's around more. And sometimes when I think about people who suffer with addiction of drugs, they're like, man, no matter where I go, I just keep running into it. And people who don't do drugs goes, I don't. Who do you hang out with? And it's weird. Is there a law of attraction with that? Or some kind of thing like, because I'm not looking for it. It's just like we find each other like two ships in the night, no matter where I'm at. I could be at a job. When I was a teacher, if someone's into the weirdness, into the dark arts, we'll find each other fast. Like, we'll just look at each other and we know. There's like an unspoken conversation in a quick glance. And we know, okay, we're both freaks. And so what is that? And I noticed it goes in the drugs too.
Yeah. Well, in terms of law of attraction, right, could be, I believe there's an energy that people give off, right? And I don't think it's as coincidental as you may think, right? My sense is there's a lot of conscious process is in that, but you just don't recognize it. But I do believe there's people that give off a certain energy. There could be some physical attribute parts that we recognize. But I think it sounded like there's some actively searching for that as well. And I think what's really important is when you talk about women on that level, I think I wonder if it's not so much about the women, but what that relationship represents, right? In terms of what you get from that. And there's probably some validation that you get from something like that.
There is.
For sure.
There is.
And probably stemmed from your early childhood and things like that. And so the relationships we engage in a lot of times, if we're not being mindful, is we're filling these voids.
Yes.
Right? And so I don't know if you've broken that down before, but those type of relationship you engage in, there is a reciprocity going on there for that person you connect with, and that. But I do believe there are certain energies that we can feel. As clinicians, that's just one of the things that I believe I've have is you can sense certain energies of someone as well. And
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and so my guess would be that's probably what's going on, is that there's this unconscious process, but there's some intention towards it, and you're searching for it. And I don't think it's so coincidental. Like if someone's searching for someone who uses substances, they're going to be actively searching for someone, and there's probably certain attributes or energies that they give off as well that attract them to that.
When you say energies, are you talking more of you're talking energy like an aura, or are you talking like energies or of actually like got that little scratch in the neck looking around?
Well, that, but I'm talking about like aura as well, like whether it be someone leaning more on optimism or that, or someone's more pessimistic, and so you can get that sense sometimes, and then sometimes people are drawn to that. People who are, pessimistic, they're not going to be searching out for optimistic people if they're not trying to get better. They're going to search those kind of people out, and people who are high, optimistic energy, if that's something they want, they're not going to be connecting with people who aren't positive, they're pessimistic. And so that's what I believe in the energies that we give off, the vibes.
Yeah. Okay. See, we're on the same thing. Yeah. See, that's what I was thinking, because, and I'm going to tie this into the substance abuse, tie this back in, but like I was dating this woman, I'll call her Stimpy. That's her nickname. She knows who she is. Her sister has been sexually assaulted so many times by strangers, and we're like, how does this happen? And it's like, I've never known someone who's been sexually assaulted so many times. And she's like, I was just on the bus. She's actually pressed charges and got the person convicted. I'm like, is she sending off a vibe? Or, and it attracts psychos? You know what I'm saying? And so that's the thing I meant by law of attraction. You're right. I probably, like, now I know what it is, and you're so dead on.
I'm on today?
Yeah, dude, 100%, man. You're hitting all net. You're on because, as you know, I've been going through a lot of therapy myself, and in spiritual growth and so forth. And I've learned that mine was looking for validation in the sense of I want someone that make me feel wanted, make me feel loved, but it's not that. It's an artificial. It's a substitute. Or no, counterfeit. It's a counterfeit. Looks like the real thing, maybe, but under close examination, it's invalid. It provides nothing. There's no substance to it. And you're just constantly, like a drug addict, chasing that validation to the point where it becomes extreme. One woman, then you have two women, then you have three women. It just keeps stacking, and nothing, the hole's never filled. It's like digging in sand, right? But with that said, now that I'm on the other side, and I kid you not, I remember thinking, I'm going to be like this for the rest of my life. I will never be able to be, and here I'm transparent with my life. I will never be able to be in a monogamous relationship. I've never been in one in my life. As an adult male, spoiler alert, right? As an adult male, and this includes my marriage, and I'm not talking adultery, cheating. I was always spoiled. What do you want for your birthday? I want 2 women. I want 3. Whatever I wanted, I got through my whole adult life. And I thought, I'll never be able to shake this. When I would date, that's what I was looking for. You know what I'm saying? But it's weird, even when I wasn't looking, like I say, when I'm at work, I'm satisfied with what I have. People who are like that would reach out to me. Now that I've done the work and addressed that inner child and healed and stuff, that doesn't even appeal to me. You know what I'm saying? Like in a movie, if I saw a woman like that, like, oh man, I'd love to have her. Now I'm just like, I crave normalcy, a healthiness. But the crazy part is that part, I could still see it in other people. It's almost like, someone who was sexually abused, they could tell when someone else has been sexually abused. It's like I could still see it in them. Okay. And it's weird if someone does kind of drop a hint, it's almost repulsive to me. It has the opposite. It's not a draw, it's an opposite draw. Opposite. It pushes me away. You know, like.
So what do you think, if I may ask you, what do you think has taken place in your healing process? Because for you to have made that major shift, which is a good thing.
I think it's a combination of things. One is I went back to I had to do a lot of inner child work, and I think or it's called shadow work or whatever people call it nowadays, where I had to deal with a lot of the abandonment issues when I was as a kid in the unfulfilled or what's it called, reciprocated love.
It could be,
yes, and feeling wanted because I was rejected in so many continuously, and then ultimately discarded, as a kid. So once I did the inner work, examined that, and then also brought in a spiritual piece. Like I rededicated myself to God, and I would, I completely gave my life to Jesus. God, please, help me through this. And what that did was also give me a moral compass. Something to a blueprint. Because what do? I could do the inner child work, and it made me see things differently, completely. But that actually was more the Bible, the teachings of Jesus gave me a more solid footing or something tangible. But it was that. But it took a long time. It took a while, and then even the change, it took months. And this was even done through EMDR while hooked up to the machine, working on this to get out of it. But but yeah, it was that. And now I feel like I'm the person I should have been. I feel like I'm the person I used to be, if that makes sense. It's like the damage, it's still there, but it's like, it's would you say like you don't identify it as the damage or as the addict?
You're not identified by it. You're not defined by it.
It's like a footnote. All that is a footnote, but but I can tell. I can tell like true story. I went to a car dealership with one of my friends. He actually owns the warehouse 2 doors over from here, and we went to go. I took him to go get his car, and there was a young lady there. She probably was like 24, very South OC blonde, just giving me the looks, and I am not her type. I'm not, but I know what it is.
Yeah,
she's out there. She's in I call it the dark arts. I stole that from the comedian Theo Von because he struggled with the same thing. And she's in the dark arts, and I could tell, and I know, but it doesn't draw me. Back in the day, I'm like, hey, what's up? I would.
Yeah.
And now I'm just like, it's like if it was Brussels sprouts, I don't like Brussels sprouts anymore. I don't have to binge on Brussels sprouts.
Got it.
And so it's not that repulsed might have been a strong word. It's something that I just don't want. But yeah, but it took a lot of healing and a lot of searching inwards, and that's hard because you have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah. And
being honest with yourself and going, this was wrong, holding myself accountable for the bad things I've done, because when you have an addiction like that or a vice, you do bad things. Like I've been with women that have been in relationships. I've been with women, all types of relationships. You know what I'm saying? That's why I say I've broken all the 10 commandments except murder. But I tried to when I was younger, and I'm dead serious, but I've broken them all. And I had to sit in that shame and own it, radically accept it, radical acceptance, and say, do you know what? You see how this feels? How do you think that person felt when you destroyed their relationship? And I had to sit with all that, like seriously, and it just broke me on top of my own traumas that I'm dealing with. And this is what's come out of it is just, it's like an old dog sitting on a porch. He doesn't want to chase cars anymore. You don't even got to put a chain, a collar with a chain to the tree. He's like, I'm not going anywhere. I know that chasing cars leads to nowhere. You're going to get ran over. It's like a country dog versus city dog.
Yeah.
A country dog just sits on the porch and just wants some water and some food and peace. And that's where I'm at now. But I think I'm more at peace I am right now than I ever have been in my life.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
When I met you, complete turmoil on the inside. That's why I was going to tell you the other day. Wait, real quick. I'm sorry. I'm going to go long. I was going to tell you the other day. Like one day you invited me to lunch to go out to eat with you and your wife and me and the woman I was seeing. And I had so much turmoil even in that relationship. I couldn't even confirm a date to go with you because she and I had so much turmoil going on. But to me, it became normal. And I was like, now I realized the perception of it was bad. That's the person who actually triggered me off to go to EMD. I remember that I told you that story.
Yeah.
That was the person. They finished me off with the madness.
Yeah.
And I want to apologize for that because that wasn't cool. But because you're like, hey, when do you want to go? I was like, I don't know, dude. I'll let you know in about a week. And then like a month passed. Yeah. And I was like, but I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And it would be, when you're in dysfunction, it becomes your normal. Mm-hmm. It was my normal. And
one thing I was going to say too is because even myself, I didn't know you were having that inner turmoil because we would go train and roll and we would talk and laugh. And the next thing I know, you were gone I thought you were just injured and you were gone for like 3 months.
I was injured.
You weren't injured in a different way. And then when you came back, I said, hey, are you okay? He said, yeah, I was going through some really, really intensive mental health issues and I got the EMDR treatment and it was really shocking to me. And I said, you know what I do? How come you never reached out to me? And so even at that level, so it's important for people sometimes, definitely important not to make assumptions. We do, because you never know. In the work that I do, you never know what's going on. I call it to take off the roof of the house, which is like the person. We always assume where someone may treat us a certain way that, it's about us, but we make these false assumptions. But just simple things of validating someone, just say, hey, how are you doing? That can make a difference in people's lives because I talked about in the last podcast is just saying hello to a stranger, acknowledging someone. That person could have thought of killing themselves that night. And you hear that stuff happen all the time. Is that draw energy or where that comes from? We don't know. But the simple question, whether it be with your child or anyone, just say, hey, how are you doing? Checking in on them is really important because that validation. And validation, by the way, isn't a bad thing. We all need some level of validation, whether it be work, recognition, and then even in jiu-jitsu training, when you see Professor Philippe go, hey, nice job, Eddie Bravo, that validation keeps me going. And
when you walk in the door, how he greets, right? Does he ever go like, hey, when you come into class at me?
Yeah.
That just like, hey,
and
I'm welcome.
And it's like, when he does that, his smile is like the first time ever seeing you. And that it really makes someone feel really, really good and meaningful. And that's why a lot of people are drawn to it is because not only for the exercise of it all, but it's like this constant validation as well. And of course, him greeting you in that way, goes up to everybody and shakes their hand, that big smile really helps. But it's when we seek validation, seek it in a way where it's unhealthy, and that's what you were doing. I believe with those female relationships is you were constantly seeking that validation to fill that void that you didn't get through neglect and so forth. And I think that gave you some level of power to be able to engage in those type of relationships. So I'm glad. A couple things that I think that if I could guess of what process went through is a lot of work with your self-worth, right? Self-worth is someone's sense of value and meaning is the reason why you probably either sabotage relationships or what have you, is you probably felt like you didn't deserve that. I think there's some level of maturity as well. As people get older, right, there's maturity. But you also talk about spirituality, and spirituality is one of the most robust components that differentiates people who are successful and not in the recovery process. And so remember, spirituality isn't necessarily a God or a higher being. It could also mean a deeper purpose and meaning in their life. And so people who have a purpose and meaning, and if they have some type of higher power as well, right, those people who with some form of spirituality tend to fare better than people that don't. So,
you know what? I agree with you. And to add to that too, what also helps, in my opinion, I don't know if this is part of the whole psychological process, is your inner circle, your community. Like that's what saved me. Because when I got to the point where I was so broken, and it's weird, it was a rapid break. It wasn't over months. Mm-hmm. It literally happened within, I would say, a few hours from going from my whatever shell, whatever I was, my normal at the time, to being literally disassociated. Yeah. Like I felt like I was outside of myself. Mm-hmm. and then the unraveling of me.
Yeah.
It was so fast. Like I didn't get a chance to go, man, you know what? I've been feeling down lately. It was so hard hitting. And I was fortunate where I had a good friend of mine named Steve called me. And how are you doing? By that point, dude, I was already a mess. I didn't know. And I've said this before, I think on the podcast, like the very first episode, because I was talking to this guy named Brett, who's a marriage family therapist. But it's when you get to the point where I was, and I don't know if you've ever been there, when you get trauma triggered and you don't even know what a trauma trigger is, you've never felt one before, it's confusing. It's almost like I felt like Scotty from Star Trek beamed me somewhere else. I was like, there's something, I'm here, but I'm not here, and I'm not me. And I don't know how to go back. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's horrible. It's horrible where you're at. Yeah. So, and it just kept going and going. It got to the point, like, and I think I told you, I was going to take my own life. And it was bad, dude.
Wow.
Sorry.
No. And hey, I don't believe in coincidences. I think everything fell in place at that moment in time for a reason, with whether it be Steve, whether it be a call to that place, me reaching out to you at one point or what have you. And so I think it's big that you're sharing that, because there's a lot of people out there that are like that, where they've repressed for so long and so much, and it got to a breaking point. And so, but really, really proud of you for really coming to that and getting to that place where I always tell people we always have the opportunity to create a second chapter in our life. And I see that all the time with people, right? No one experience, no one issue defines anybody. And so, so good to hear, man. Good growth.
Yeah, but enough about me. It was pretty intense, dude. So,
well, glad you're here, man.
Me too.
You've been impactful for me in many ways. I'm still going to hold you to that double date.
Sure. I gotta find somebody. I gotta find somebody normal, dude. It might be a third wheel.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Because I kid you not, man. One thing that happens during the healing process is that I'm able to, like, red flags. They're real red flags. Like they're no longer, just keep it. I understand the magnitude of the risk.
Yeah.
And it's just not worth it. So I just.
And one of the things that I help people do, and this is knowledge in the substance recovery arena, is play that tape forward, right? Play that tape forward. Like, if I call that person, then what? Then what? Then what? Or, hey, I smoke a little bit of that marijuana. Then what? Then what? And it's usually this downward spiral. And then you have to ask yourself, is that worth it?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, like, hey, if I call that person, I know that person's history. I know where it's going to end up. I know it's going to impact my self-worth issues and stuff. Ask yourself, is it worth it? And a lot of times when we're in a good place, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And so, so there's a lot of techniques like that to do. But a lot of what prevents you going down that downward spiral is having a sense of self-worth, that, no, I have value and meaning. And that's another thing that I think happened to you, is you've recalibrated your value system, your belief system and value system, is that you told yourself, I deserve better.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And that comes with your spirituality as well.
What's crazy, though, you don't know. You just don't know that you deserve better. You're just, it's just with anything, it becomes your normal. Like I remember when I moved here from Italy when I was a kid, I had friends that were like in junior high, and they'd be smoking pot with their parents before they go to school.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what the smell was or what it looked like. But to them, that's just normal.
Yeah.
And now, like, I've talked to one of my friends. He looks back and goes, dude, what the hell's up with my mom? Why would she do that? He's older and more mature now, but at the time, it was normal. But going back, so relationships, one thing I've noticed is that they seem to kind of parallel addiction too, right? Do they?
Well, they can. Well, I believe that there is an intimate relationship that you have with your disease or diseases. Really, they're really, really. In my book, there's a poem there by someone only known as Joanne. It's called "I Am Your Disease," and every time I read that poem, whether it be in a group, people get really emotionally triggered. is because she defines in the first half of it of this intimate relationship she has with your disease. You were there with me at all in the troubled times. You helped me. You saved me. And she describes it. But in the second half of the poem, she describes it's like the disease took over and gave its playbook of how you manage it and disempower it, right? Things like fellowship and so forth, and humility. But yeah, and so take me back again. You mentioned a question. You mentioned a question.
Oh, addiction and relationships.
Yeah, intimate. You have an intimate relationship. You had an intimate relationship with your trauma. You had an intimate relationship with your inner child, and that's what we work on the relationship level. And so that's why the first thing you said when you had all these women, it said it's not really the women, it's what that relationship offers you. My belief.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and for you, exactly those red flags and people in early treatment, I say, let me look at the first 30 people who you last texted, right? I could tell a lot about where you're struggling with those last 30 people. And so literally people have to get rid of their drug dealers or the unhealthy people in their life. And it's no judgment on the people. You just have to be at that point where how is this relationship going to impact my better health? Not the person, this relationship. And it's a lot easier. You could see things more objectively when you take it on the relationship level around the person level. And I do that all the time with like friendships or people I meet. You know, if it's not going to be a healthy dynamic, I have to decide if I can include that relationship in my arena and if it's going to be beneficial or not. And that's kind of what you're doing with those red flags is because you didn't see those red flags before.
Yeah.
You were raw, driven by impulse and immediate gratification. But now you're able to step back and say, no, I'm worth more, right? I want meaningful relationships in my life.
Yeah. Yes. And just to add to that, the reason why too is that I was just kind of comparing it to drug addiction is because, you know, when I was younger, I was around a lot of drug dealing and so forth. And I've seen people relapse and, you know, where even the drug dealer would be like, no, dude, you have a job now. You're doing well. Like even the drug dealer's like, don't. Oh, wow. But they give it to me because the person's like, come on, man, you know, like whatever. Yeah. And that look and behavior of the addict coming back, I've seen that in a few people that I know. You know, at our age, we got people going through divorces, going through breakups or whatever. I've seen people who've been in like obviously trauma bonded relationships, right? And the worst, just horrible relationships, just it's bad. And they know it's bad. And they leave, but they're like, I gotta go back. Yeah. And I've seen it multiple times. And I remember like this is something I learned recently is like, say in the last, say 6 months, I had 2 close friends do that, right? Go back to like bad situations they know are bad, but they go, but I just got to. And I'm going to change that person or whatever the rationale is. I'm going to change them or I just got to see. And they're willing to risk it all for them. And I'm like, I've heard this before. I've seen this before. And I realized it's very similar to a drug addict going back for a hit, you know? And it's like, what do you do? Like say to tie it into relationships or even the answer to the drugs, when you see a family member fiending and the rationale's out the window, they acknowledge everything they're going to do. They know it's going to destroy them. They know this and that, but they're still going to do it. Can anything be done?
Well, absolutely. I think something at that moment in time, can anything be done or can that person ever get help?
Both.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer that anyone can make a change, right? And usually what happens, it's all the moving parts around them that can help facilitate that change. But yes, they can. But it's that part of, you know, situational awareness is a really big thing, right? Is you know, if to me, I tell people all the time, right? If that if you find yourself as you're trying to get sober from alcohol and you find in your early recovery alcohol in front of you, you lost 10 moves way beyond there. Because when alcohol found its way here, you've messed up or made poor decisions leading up to that.
Oh.
And so, yeah.
I get that. I get that analogy very well. It reminds me of jiu-jitsu. No, like if you're on your back and someone's on your back, hooks in, and you're on your belly, you've lost steps before that happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, people tell me all the time, like, hey, Dr. Brian, I'm never going to, when they go to treatment, I'm never using alcohol again. I'm never using heroin again or meth or fentanyl, whatever. I said, that's great. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about all the factors that will lead up to that. The isolation, the resentments, the blaming everybody else. Those are the factors that are going to lead you into that, what I call that window of vulnerability. Because when you're in that window of vulnerability and it's just you and the substance, odds are that substance is going to win. And so that's where we have to take a proactive approach, recognize the perfect storm before you're in the perfect storm. Once you're in that perfect storm, it's done. Whatever it is. It's like a roller coaster, I call it. And once you're on there, unless you scream your head off, they're not stopping. You just got to hold on. And so, but you have to recognize those steps early on, the triggers, way before that. Because if you're face to face with your disease, you lost a long time ago.
Dude, that's deep. Yeah, you're right. I'm going to steal that from you because I have my inner group of friends, like the ones that I talk to, or whatever. Not inner group, just friends. A lot of people seem to reach out to me when they're going through stuff.
Yeah,
and I'm going to use that because once you get that far, it's chess. You've already been set up. At that point, like it's the momentum is against you.
It's the patterns, and that's what we try to break. Are these patterns? It's this wiring of patterns, right? We call it old people, places, situations, or things. That if you want to make a change, if you're not, I guarantee you're surrounding yourself with old people, places, situations, or things, or thinking patterns.
Yeah,
and that happens way before. Like, oh yeah, I'll just, I'll just miss this therapy meeting. I'm going here, or I'll hang out with this person, or, and that's what it really boils down to, and it builds momentum. And that's what the disease. We always have to respect its capabilities. And like with your traumas are always going to be in that corner, that inner child on some degree. And you have to respect its capabilities and say, I acknowledge you.
Yes, I agree. And to add to that I think it's important to acknowledge, like for me, the bad side of me, like like there's things that I've done that are pretty violent and bad. And, I don't like thinking about them because they're like scary. Mm-hmm. But then I need to acknowledge that it happened, and it doesn't make me a bad person, and just make peace with it.
Yeah,
with that monster, as opposed to going, I just don't want, or like I'll use the analogy of a war veteran who's like maybe shot people. I don't want to think about the war. Mm-hmm. That's not going to help. You might as well make peace with the war, right? As opposed to, it makes sense. Yeah. So, but going back to addiction, because that's going to be on the description of this podcast episode, not Kenny crying like a baby. Okay, so we're going to go to the family. I mean, sorry. We found out the person has an addiction. What do? We start formulating a plan to talk to them, make them feel acknowledged and safe to have communication. What other tips or concepts can people apply?
So, yeah, definitely having dialogue. Like I said, it all depends on what level the person's struggling with. This deal with the people that we've tried everything. We've tried the talk. We've tried the tough love, the soft love, the validation. We've tried it all, and we're desperate. This person's way far into their issues that if something doesn't change, something really bad's going to happen. Uh-huh. And so, yes, absolutely. In the first front, have a dialogue, healthy dialogue. Acknowledge them and try to understand where they're coming from, provide the support. But like when people come into treatment, their loved one's in treatment, the individual is important, but it's not the person I'm focusing on. It's that family unit. Because if that person leaves after 45, 60, 90 days and they go back to that same family unit and they haven't evolved and changed, the chances of them being long-term successful greatly diminishes. And so what I would work with the family at this level, if you're asking me like, okay, what do you do with the families? I get the family together and I have these 12 steps. And number one, they have to create a unified vision. They have to decide, who is going to be actively involved in this process. They have to accept the need for change. And then we gather resources and identify the leverages and how we're going to approach it. So it's a very step-by-step strategic approach, but it's the family unit. So where a lot of this come from, information, was actually an intervention on the family. Because like you said, you did the actual intervention, right? What happens a lot is, we get them in that room and so forth, but that there has to be an intervention on a family level. And if they're not on the same page, we have to vet those people out, and we need this nucleus of people who are really going to hold the boundaries, maintain this unified vision, aren't going to fray, and be okay with putting your loved one in a position. I call it the 3 natural consequences, inevitable consequences of untreated mental health or addiction, is your loved one can end up in jail, hospital, or they can lose their life. Homeless is temporary, but if they're untreated mental health and it gets too severe enough, they're either going to end up in jail, hospital, or lose their life, or take someone else's life. And you have to accept that's the one where the loved one can die is one of the most biggest factors is why families get paralyzed. They don't take help. They don't get their loved one the help they need. I don't think you being a parent, my being a parent myself, I don't think we can ever accept the emotional part of that. But we have to accept the reality, because it helps us get unstuck and take the necessary actions that we need to take, because fear and guilt, legitimate emotions, but when they're to the point where they paralyze us. So that's what I would work with families, is a lot of the families I work with, I said, are you at the point where you accept that your loved one, if this keeps going on, something really bad is going to happen, they can die? And 99% when they come to see me at this level, they're yes. And that's the biggest first step is to take on the disease, is you have to accept that change needs to happen. So.
Yeah. That's a lot, but it's necessary. It's necessary. I never thought about the part of the family changing. I don't know anyone who's ever thought about the part of the family changing.
To me, it's the most critical part, because if the family changes and then the person goes in the recovery process, there's a greater process taking place. We'll call it the recovery process, that person's going to get that help. But if they're not doing their part, the family unit, then, the psychiatrist I used to work with, he was a trauma surgeon, then became a psychiatrist. And so he'd usually tell military terms. He would call the disease the terrorist in the home, right? Mm-hmm. That disease what does a terrorist do? It alters your lifestyle, it holds you in fear. And so that's got to take ownership again over the home. And the family unit is a really critical part that people don't really recognize. That's where the intervention is, not on the individual. Like when these interventions that you talk about, I don't know what took place in yours, but the real intervention should be on the family, not this person. Okay. Because you can't convince this person till you get these people on board. Because he could pacify. There's a saying, the reason why your son can say that, 3 words, because it works, right? Mm-hmm. It works really well. Yeah. Until you're telling us it's not working anymore. That's when they're running out of options. Whenever you take away options, people have that choice, fight, flight, or freeze. And that's essentially what we're doing when we put them at a point of desperation, is we've greatly limited any options. And the options are, you're not going to get healthy, we're not going to support you. You want to get healthy and make change, that's the option that we're willing to support. So it puts the responsibility on them.
Okay. And then once you go to that process there, this is to get them into rehab, into a place, or is this to get them to agree, your book?
No. So I talk about what I mentioned earlier. So treatment can be the formal level of treatment. So there's all kinds. There's inpatient hospitalization, there's detox, there's residential, there's intensive outpatient, partial hospitalization. Sometimes it could be therapy or seeing a psychiatrist. So it's some form of help. But I know some churches that have their own modality and dynamic. And so mm-hmm. treatment isn't what people usually think, like rehab and sober living. It can be, but it's any type of getting to a point where they're going to accept some type of help. And usually at this level, it's some type of high-level intervention that they need. Yeah. That they need, if appropriate, they need psychiatric medication to get them to a better level. They have to be out of their environment because their environment is perpetuating it. There's access to substances, unhealthy people. But treatment is a broad term, but usually, like I said, the people that I work with at this level, they need something structured like that, because typically treatment will provide structure, routine, accountability, and all the different factors that you can't get from home. Yeah. Right. And so I know grandmas, and stuff like that. So because that's where people that's where people can thrive in a healthy way is all these environmental factors. They can hide, they can accessibility, and we have to shut that down. And one way of shutting that down is putting them in a place where they don't have access to that.
Would you agree that the person that you see that's exhibiting as an addict, the one who's lying, manipulating, to a person who loves that person, would you say that that's not them?
Good point.
Would you agree with that statement?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I call it an 80-20 model. And that 80-20 model is like a pie chart of why the person struggles. 80% of why someone struggles is legitimate and valid. There's no hard number. That's just my conceptualization. Someone, let's say, for example, is struggling with heavy heroin addiction and unhealthy relationships and so forth. 80% of why they struggle could be they had traumatic upbringing. They were sexually assaulted. They had drugs in the home. They had neglectful parents. Maybe they have a medical condition. So 80% of why they struggle is legitimate and valid. 20% is the part of the disease that I call the manipulation part. Manipulation part is pacifying, lying, blaming, using sex, avoidance, all that. That is what's important to shut down. And that's what I work with families to shut that down, because if you don't shut down that 20%, that 20% creates the barrier to working on the 80%.
Got it.
Like your son, that's that pacifying that you talk about in grandma. That's where we need to shut that down. And so that's the part of the disease. And so, yes, absolutely. And I tell people to separate that disease, not to say that that disease takes any responsibility from the person. Like, oh, that's a disease, that's why they can act like that. But the yelling person, the blaming, all that stuff is you have to be able to step away from that and say, that's the sickness, that's the disease part. Too many times we take it upon ourselves, we get emotional. Oh, well, I was abused as a child. You weren't there for me. Or you divorced dad at an early age and I felt abandoned. And we take responsibility for that. But there comes a point where that person also has to take responsibility, because that's their card they're going to play. That's the manipulation part of the disease. And that can go on for life. And that's where the guilt and fear comes into play. And we have to take ownership, and that's where we make amends. Amends means to repair. If you were neglectful as a parent, be present. If you weren't sober during their childhood years, being sober is your amends. That's how you repair. And that's what you're doing right now. I was going to mention it earlier. All the things that you're doing now, that's your living amends. If you were engaging in infidelity or hurting people, being kind, helping other people, this is an amends process for you.
Yeah, it
right?
is. I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
but yeah.
This is a healing, and I always want to recognize you on that. Is number one of the many people that you're helping, but this is healing for you. Right?
Yeah.
This is an amend. This is your living amends, where you are taking contrary action, undoing all those things that you did. By those people you hurt, you're actually helping and saving people on many levels as well. So this is part of your amends recovery process as well.
Thank you. Yeah, no, you're right. I didn't. Yeah, because people ask me that, like, why are you doing this? Because a lot of people get better, on their to go to the same route I have, and they just live a private life. And believe it or not, it's more of a spirit. It's a part of my spiritual journey too. I believe that how some people feel called into ministry or called into, like Mother Teresa, go help the poor in India. I feel like to be transparent about my life. My whole life, I've been very. There's always been parts of my life that have always been secret. Whether it's crime or bad behavior, or even highly immoral behavior. Mm-hmm. And it's just always been something that I've had about me. And I'm now, it's time to just come clean in hopes it'll help other people,
Well, you give them permission to be okay. It's okay that you had a dysfunctional upbringing. It's okay. That's what you're doing, is you're acknowledging them and giving them permission to talk. And that's why I think it's really huge now that where people are more and more talking about their struggles, especially high-level people, whether it be actors, athletes, when they're talking about their struggles with addiction, it really can save lives, is because you're validating, you're normalizing, and you're giving people the permission to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And so especially when someone has self-disclosure like you do, it is a profound effect on people, is because it really, they can relate to you, but it also helps them recognize, like, hey, we're not much different. There's a common thread between us.
Yeah. Yes.
Especially with like high level people, we kind of put them on a pedestal that, wow, how can anyone struggle like that? Or these rich people, these rich high level people,
Rich people like you, not me.
and then so this is false front. But when people come that level and say, hey, we're vulnerable like you, we get sad, we're suicidal, we struggle, it really, really normalizes and helps reach people in a different way.
Yeah, and regarding the suicides part, I just have it. My view on it is completely shift. I don't condone it in any way whatsoever, but I understand, you know, how people, the psychological suffering could be so unbearable that you're so desperate for relief.
Yes,
you know, and I just think like if previous to this, if you would have taken your life, I'd be like, he's weak, man. I mean, really, you know, like there's a disappointment and anger, and I'd be putting you down. You know, I wouldn't do it publicly, but in my head, you know, because it's talk about the dead, it's not right. But now I'm like, man, like even now when I hear like, oh, this celebrity took their own life, I'm like, only God knows what they were dealing with.
Well, they had that recent golfer at 30 years old take his life.
Oh, is that what happened? I just know they found him dead.
Grayson Murray, yeah. I just read the article because they had another golfer that was his good friend crying and tearful, and I never followed up. And yeah, from what I read, he took his life. And so, and I'm glad you bring suicidality because it's a huge topic. And I talk about in the book myths of suicidality. People have this idea that if I talk about suicide with a person, that's going to put it in their head. No, research has consistently showed that if you talk to someone about suicide, it doesn't increase it. It actually can help mitigate and lessen the chance of suicide because you acknowledge and you have an open discussion with them. And most people, like you said, is most people that they've interviewed who survived suicides don't want to die. They just want the pain to stop. So a direct correlation is feeling hopeless, that they feel like they're helpless, hopeless, and they're just in immense pain, emotional or physical pain. They just want the pain to stop. But you know, anyone that plans it out for months and years, those are what we call outliers. But most people, they're just in a level of immense pain and helplessness and hopelessness that just want to stop. And they honestly believe that is the only outlet for them. And that's why that window of suicidality, just like acknowledging someone, getting them help, is really important. And that's why I said, like, you know, just acknowledging someone, hey, how are you doing? You know, can instill some level of hope. I literally had a client many, many years ago. He was literally, and whatever you call it, energies, he was literally ready. He was single, he was middle-aged, was ready to hang himself in his condominium, literally ready to hang himself. And he had the rope and everything. It was a 2-story. And all of a sudden he kept hearing this ping on his laptop. Ping. He's like, what the heck? And it was irritating to him. He was ready to take his life. And then he went downstairs and checked on it. It was a friend he hasn't talked to in years, just saying, hey, what's up? And here he is, ready to do this. And so he starts engaging in dialogue. Next thing you know, they're talking and catching up. And so it got him out of that window. And so just recognize you can get out of that window. And it's usually a perfect storm where you most find people who make attempts. It's this perfect storm. They're either have a trauma going on, they're under the influence, something really, really is happening. It's a perfect storm, and you can get out of that perfect storm as well. You know, but obviously you want ongoing treatment as well. So I'm glad you brought up suicidality. It's really real. It used to be a middle-aged person deal, but we're seeing a lot more elementary kids, teens taking their life as well.
Yeah.
So it's really, I'm glad you bring that topic up as well.
Yeah, there's actually a few guys at the gym. You know, they'll remain nameless, so don't worry, guys, if you're listening. But I've had some of them since this podcast open up to me, and just on the mat or afterwards, can we talk?
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm not a therapist, and I'm like, yeah, man, and they'll just say, man, you know, and just kind of open up and tell their lives. There's even one where I was talking to him on the phone. He actually brought this up. I brought him around a group of friends. I brought him to a Bible study. And he brought this up. But I still don't want to mention his name because maybe he didn't want anyone outside the Bible study. It was a men's group.
Okay.
I brought him to the Bible study after this happened. But it's an Irvine guy. And we were training, just regular. We're talking on the phone. And I could tell he was just very, just down or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, like, are you all right? And they're like, well, like they don't answer the question. They just kind of just start saying things. And I could hear in the background they were messing with something. So I went to his house. Not while on the phone.
Yeah.
He was there on the couch with a gun ready to do it. So I took his gun from him. And he thanked me for it.
Wow.
And I kept his gun for quite a while. He's good now. But yeah, that's stuff that has happened behind the scenes. And I'm just like, and he thanks me. He's like, man, he has kids and everything. And he's like, I just got overwhelmed, man. And it was just me just happened to call him to check on him. And just being in tune too. Not just going, hey, what's up, man? You going to train Monday? All right, I'll see you Monday, and hanging up. Really, hey, how are you doing? I'm really listening.
Yeah.
And I just sensed something. He wasn't answering the are you okay? Like the real inquiries. Because if someone's okay, go, yeah, dude, you know what? This week of work was rough, but hey, you know what? It was none of that. It was just, drop-offs. So.
Yeah. And yeah, there's those energies, right? And I do believe also as well, at least in my belief system, is there's a greater process. And I've had that several times where I reach out to someone and, oh, wow, I have something going on right now and so forth. And it leads into some type of dialogue and conversation. And I've done that before out of the blue. Just we'll text someone that I haven't texted for a while or a client or a friend or something. And then they're going through something. Well, one thing, if I may mention too, is because you mentioned this person and had family and kids. And a myth here is, to me, that I like to acknowledge is that people say, oh, my suicide is a selfish act. I think emotionally maybe it's a selfish act or because of the pain that you can cause. But in terms of that, people truly believe, like, hey, how can you kill yourself? You have wife and kids and all these things. But when that person's at that point, they truly believe that is the right option. They believe they are doing the right thing. That, hey, I'm better off. I'm a burden. If I was gone, my kids, my spouse will be much better without me. And so that's one thing I really, really want to communicate with people is that people think that you take your life, it's so selfish, but they really believe that they're making the right choice and this is the best choice. And so that's an important concept too. It's because it guilts people, right? If I have thoughts of wanting to kill myself, I'm a selfish person, what have you, but it really isn't in a lot of the work that I've had. And also just let you know, it's a rough statistic, but many people who have survived suicide attempts, they shot themselves, they hung themselves, they crashed their car, is a lot of people they've interviewed actually had a change of heart, right? They had a change of heart once they attempted, whether or not they take a bunch of pills and they try to vomit themselves. And you just think about all the people who attempted and were successful and but had a change of heart as well. And so that means that, to me, the reason I mentioned that is that window of wanting to take that step, you can snap out of that as quickly as well. And then you get people who have a change of heart that last second. So, but a very important topic, a very necessary topic. I know it's sensitive and maybe some of your listeners, it's really tough to hear. But it's an important topic to discuss.
Yeah. And I agree. And the change of heart thing, I look back at my situation and it's weird. It's scary to think that I could go that dark. Like, I'm shocked. And it's when you're in the moment, it totally makes sense. But it's not, and just to kind of elaborate on more, it's not like for me, it seemed like I didn't even think about other people. And not even in a selfish way. It was just so unbearable. Mm-hmm. It was, the analogy that was coming to my mind as you were talking, like, imagine being on fire. But when you're on fire in real life, your nerves eventually burn up and you can't feel it, right? Let's say that doesn't happen. You feel it. Yeah. So it's unbearable. And it just continues to be unbearable. And there's a bridge to jump off of to make it end. You'd probably jump off the bridge. You're not thinking, well, what's my wife going to think of me? Mm-hmm. You're just so in so much unbearable pain. It's overwhelming. I'm not thinking past that. Everything else is just
relief.
It's relief. I need someone to put me out. I need a fire extinguisher, or I'm jumping off this bridge. It is so unbearable, and it is continuous. Like, I don't even get a breather. You know, it's suffocating. And so I just want to point that out too, because it's not, it's at least from my experience, it's not, you know, me calculating out, well, do you know what? I think these people, screw them. You know, like it's because I still love everyone in my life. I still love the same people. I feel the same way. It's just I didn't have room to think about that because it's almost like fight or flight. It's like flight at the most extreme.
Yeah,
I need to escape this body. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it seems like a case of that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, man, I was just sharing that too because it's real life, man, and it happens like at our gym. Everyone's always happy, even when they're injured. How you doing, man? Oh, my knee's blown out. But hey, how you doing, dude? Let's roll, right? It's like everything's fine and good. But yeah, there's a lot of people there that are hurting, and that's why I even brought in Heather. She's the episode before this, actually. One conversation with her. And I said, hey, can you come on our podcast? I already knew. Yeah. I could sense she's been through a lot. And we really didn't even go as deep as I thought, even though the episode was deep. I mean, she's been through a lot. And even now talking about checking in, I do check in on her. And not only do I check in on her, is I even write her like just text messages or a quick call like, hey, you're a good person. And I say just positive things. I said, I just remind you of that. All right. You know, whatever. And she goes, thanks, you know, because I mean, she lost both her parents to cancer. She's adopted. So that's her world.
Okay.
Lost both her parents within the last 3 years to cancer. So she's just barely coming out of that dark place. And she spun out with substance abuse from it. Okay. And now she's coming out of it. And I'm just not saying anything she didn't say on the podcast. So, but so she's, but I could just see it in her eyes when I was talking to her. When I first met her, I was like, hey, you know, this and that. Hey, do you train here? She's like, no, I came from Upland. I go, oh, okay. And we were just talking, and I was like looking, and you just kind of, you like how they see in Vietnam that 1,000-yard stare? Yeah. She had the 1,000-yard stare. Yeah. So I was like, hey, well, tell me about you. Tell me about your life. And she goes, I go, what's the matter? She goes, oh, nothing. I don't mind. It caught me off guard. I've never had anyone in jiu-jitsu say that. And I go, I don't know. There's just something about you that I just wanted to. And she began to open up. Yeah. And I go, hey, come share. Are you in the help? He goes, I love to help other people. I go, come on.
Ironically speaking, and Heather, if you're listening, you're awesome. I'm glad you are part of the GBHQ team. And I actually just added her on a competition thread.
You let her on? I thought you said only cool people.
No.
Oh, dude. No, I was kidding. I'm exiting the thread now. I'm kidding.
And she's awesome. And glad to be part of the team, and you know, she's a lot of resilience. And I listened to the podcast too, and that's that resilience. And there's a silver lining in what people go through and that you've gone through, and that's what helps her probably get through a lot of life. That grit and grind. You can't. The human condition has that. Sometimes people can't find it, or they need to find it. But grit and resilience is where I see one of the most defining factors of people who continue to succeed and not. If I can share one thing, since we're talking about jiu-jitsu and what happens, because sometimes people ask like, well, why do I feel better afterwards? Or why is it so good for me if I'm depressed and so forth?
Hey, you're the doctor. I'm the patient. Whatever.
Because I get a lot of people wondering about that. And so some of the things that happen, we have a hormone called oxytocin. If you're familiar with that, that's kind of like, they say, the love hormone. When you intimately connect with people, whether it be a conversation, we're engaging in an intimate conversation, in a therapy session, you connect with friends, or of course there's the physical intimacy part. Oxytocin gets released, and that's where people just feel good after an intimate dialogue or an embrace, holding hands. Obviously, if you do sexual intimacy as well. So oxytocin is released. And also dopamine. Dopamine's released. Dopamine is a chemical for reward. And there's things that high level of that gets released as well in a jiu-jitsu exchange. Of course, there's fellowship and serotonin. There's serotonin release as well. But of course, there's stress relief. There's hyperfocus. There's mental engagement that happens, cognitive engagement. And then, of course, the conversations, the fellowship. And so sometimes I get a lot of people asking, like, why do I feel better after jiu-jitsu? Or why are you so drawn to it? And so that's the addiction. There's a lot of like endorphins, of course. Endorphins are our natural opiates. A lot of people don't know that. That's our natural. That's where we feel good. That's why a lot of people who are initially in substance recovery, they're very drawn to jiu-jitsu or things like working out in the gym or marathons because you have that natural opiate release called endorphins. So there's a lot of processes going on, and that's why so many people are drawn to it as well. So I just wanted to highlight that as well.
I didn't know that for sure, but I had a feeling, and the reason why is because when I miss jiu-jitsu for like a week, I get insomnia. Am I going through withdrawals or something? Like I can't sleep. Like no, I'm not even thinking about jiu-jitsu. I just start feeling uncomfortable. So I'll even before my knee surgery, I would just go run heels. I had to like push that VO2 max a few times hard, and I'm like, oh, there it is, and then I'll be good.
Yeah, well, exercise is really huge for people who struggle with insomnia and stuff, and yeah, for sure. And so that's why people are exhausted and tired when they engage in it. So yeah, and it's a routine that you had, the fellowship and the routine that you had. Whenever you disrupt a routine, that can have an impact on other areas of your life.
Yeah, but I could tell you one thing. I don't know about you. I have a feeling you're on the same page. A real hard session in the evening, you stretch, right? Your body's good. You go home, get a little food, take a shower, and sit on the couch. Do you feel like you're in heaven? Like you feel like kind of...
Sometimes I fall asleep in my outfit. When I first started, I was a white belt. I would literally fall asleep in my gi. I'd just crash on the couch, and it's not obviously.
But you feel like you're in the zone, right? Like,
well, that relaxation. That's why people say, like, when people understand it, like, oh man, they think like when we go out, like, oh, Brian, because none of my other brothers and friends, they don't train in jiu-jitsu, and they say, oh man, we want Brian to we got our back. And people say, like, that's the last thing we want to do is get in a fight. Because you do it so much, but also you have this emotional regulation, you have just a different mindset. But that's the last thing I want to do is get into a fight.
You don't even want to get in an argument. You feel so good.
You feel so good. And you also respect the capabilities of other people. Jiu-jitsu, you can look at someone and you don't know that they're a beast.
Yeah.
You think that there's a certain look. Unless their ears or things
like
that.
like if you ran into Philip on the street, like if he's dressed like regular and his smile, you're like, what are you looking at, buddy? Huh?
Yeah, you would never guess. And but
then you'd find out the hard way.
Yeah, but there's a lot of great stuff. It's been really, really a life changer, a game changer for me at this stage of life. So
yeah, do you know what? I actually calculated the years I've been training. It's 27.
27 years?
Yeah.
Jeez.
27, dude.
Going on my 6th year.
Yeah, because
July.
They brought it up at the comedy show, and like just these guys, I keep thinking Ruben,
Barney.
I'm jacked up in the head. So yeah, he cracked a lot of jokes on us at the table and some jiu-jitsu jokes. He went in, and it was fun, right?
Yeah.
But then afterwards, people were like, "Man, how long?" And we're just all talking about how long we've been training. And I was like, dude, I started in 97.
Wow.
So I went back and I calculated. But for Bone started, I think, 96 or 94. But, it's somehow I passed him because there was no attendance back then. Yeah. So you could be stuck at a belt. I knew one guy, he's a black belt in the Inland Empire. His name's Tyrone. Mm-hmm. He was a white belt who trained regularly, murdered people in tournaments for 6 years.
Wow.
They never promoted him. Then they gave him... It was weird. Then he was a blue belt for a month. Then he went to purple. And it's why did they? Back then. That's how it was.
That's how it was.
Yeah. Now, at least now you have an idea.
You have an idea.
Could you imagine going to college and go, "When am I going to get my PhD?" I don't know, man. Just keep writing.
Keep showing up.
Keep showing up.
Keep showing up.
Yeah. Like, well, do I have to pay for this? I mean, I'm on student loans, bro. Yeah. So what's the name of your book here?
Oh, well, it's
okay. So this is Dr. Brian's book. It's How to Get Your Resisting. Let me hold this up here. I don't know if that's coming in right. Hold on. You know what? Let me hit up camera 2 here. Is this better? There it goes. How to Get Your Resisting Loved Ones into Treatment. And I think this book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and there's somewhere else.
It's like 13 other distributors that are having, but Amazon is the main one that is taking it over, and they're the ones printing, and it's available on Kindle form as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and it's a step-by-step plan for mental health and or addiction crises. So no, this is very good. This is I would recommend this, guys. Go out and in the description of this podcast, there'll be a link. I'll put an Amazon link because most people shop Amazon.
Okay.
I'll put the name of the book, but I'll put an Amazon link. But I'd highly recommend it. And this is from someone who my son is a former substance abuse and I remember I was so desperate for it. I didn't know step by steps. This is stuff that it's like parenting. There's no guidebook. With addiction, there's no guidebook. We know how addictions can go. We know we can even learn what happens in an addiction center. But how do you get them from point A of your house to the addiction center if they're resistant or they put up walls? So this is very good. I was referred to a few guys that I know that were recovered substance. I'll say addicts, recovered addicts that referred me to. What's the organization that supports people that are family members? Is it
Al-Anon.
Al-Anon. I did the Al-Anon thing just a few times, but it was just too depressing. It was just too much for me. And I'm like, I'm not getting the tools I need.
Yeah.
I needed a book like this. Mm-hmm. So I'd highly recommend it. The resisting. I like how you emphasize the word resisting.
Yes. And just to clarify too, it's not just for substances. The way I conceptualize the disease, whether it be just substances or could be a mental health condition or any entity that someone struggles with. So, because that's one of the challenges out there is sometimes the interventions are just for substance use, but they don't neglect the mental health like suicidality, depression, bipolar disorder, or sometimes it's all mental health issues, but we don't address the substance use disorders. So that's what I wanted to capture on a general level is whatever that entity is, that entity or entities that person struggles with, it can just come in the form of a substance abuse, mental health condition, or anything else, sex addiction or anything like that. So that's the approach that I take in fighting this disease. And so you'll hear inevitably some jiu-jitsu metaphors of fighting the disease. Yeah, I talk a little bit about so what's in the book is I talk a little bit in the introduction in the first chapter, a little bit about how I got here and some of the challenges that I had. And then I talk about the fight mentality and that we all in some form of fight. And the reason why I do jiu-jitsu is write a lot of life lessons is because the mats, of course, are like life where we're put in uncomfortable situations, and it's good. If you go through the jiu-jitsu and you're smashing everyone, you're in the wrong gym, unless you're that person.
Unless you're me. I'm kidding.
Yes, I'll make sure Professor Philippe watches this episode. And so now,
okay, if you're,
I guess I just imagine Professor Philippe being in a triangle. So.
You were saying that you use a lot of jiu-jitsu analogies.
Yeah.
And if you're going around smashing everybody in your gym, you're at the wrong gym. How that concept applies to your
yes, and one of the things you got to put yourself in uncomfortable situations because that's where the growth plays. If anything is too easy, then you're not going to grow from it. And so I talk a little bit about that. I talk about what I call the 25 must knows. These are what I find the most thematic 25 foundational knowledges that doesn't matter if you're a therapist, you're well versed, or you're brand new. That's the foundation knowledge you're supposed to have. Then I talk about what I believe is the disease vaccine, which are the three most consistent factors that differentiates people who are successful or not in fighting this disease. I talk about other things of the 80-20 model that I talked about, the 20% we have to shut down. And then I talk about the phases of the recovery process because people sometimes say, well, why is my daughter still depressed? She's been taking antidepressants for 3 months. Or why does my son still have dreams of having drinking alcohol when he's been sober for a year? So I break it down into 4 phases, what that process looks like, and then the 12-step strategies of getting the family unit together, formulating a plan, and finally getting their loved one to a place where they're going to accept help.
Sounds very useful, a lot of useful information. I have a question here.
Sure. There's
a term called California sober, where they get off the drugs, but they still smoke marijuana like they're crazy. Mm-hmm. Is that sober? Is that sober? I don't think it is, but I'm not a psychologist.
When they're able to say that again,
like people go, "Oh, are you still party man or whatever?" And they're like, "Yeah, no, I stopped. I'm California sober," which means I don't do the hard drugs, but I still smoke pot all the time.
Oh, okay.
So is that sober?
Well, it all depends on how you define it. So there's this difference between being abstinent and sober. To me, absent means I'm just not using the thing. I'm not using the substance that I struggled with, and so they're like white knuckling it. They're not working on their individual self, their physical health, their social health. I'm just not using. That's like you said, what we call it white knuckling. So the analogy would be, I haven't drank alcohol for 30 years, but he's angry as heck. He hasn't gone over the divorce 30 years ago, or the resentments or the traumas. Sobriety means is an overall healthiness, not only the absent from the mind-altering substance, they're working on their individual self, whether it be through therapy, whether it be through mindfulness techniques, whether it be whatever else. There's the physical self, which is, of course, your physical body. There's a social self, which is everything outside of you. That's relationships, career. And I call it the spiritual self, which is either a higher power or your deeper purpose and meaning. You don't have to have a higher power, but it's at least having some deeper purpose and meaning. So those are the 4 areas. But that, to me, is sobriety. So I mentioned in your last podcast is that I work in addiction, I work in mental health, but I'm not against things like THC. I'm not against alcohol. I'm not against, opiates to the degree, is because there's some people out there who can have some wine with their steak and not be a problem. There's people that can take a regimen of painkillers for neck surgery and not get addicted. There's people who can smoke THC for insomnia and anxiety and not become problematic. However, if you have a family history of substance use, you have a mental health condition, that a mind-altering substance, which those are, can worsen your existing symptoms, make you more sensitive to a condition, or bring that condition sooner than later. And so in terms of that terminology, in the whole way that I look at sobriety, that wouldn't be, in my terms, sobriety. That would be harm reduction on some level where you engage in a substance but reduce the harm effects, but it wouldn't be called sobriety in my terminology.
Okay. I was just wondering about that, but that makes sense. Yeah, because some people, they've come out of rehab, but they say they're California sober, and I'm thinking, you're still altering your mind, One last question, too, that, not to go exceedingly long here. What do you, this is just for personal information, Okay. People that smoke marijuana every day, they wake up and smoke all day and go, that can't be healthy, right? That's an addiction, right? If you have to use it that much.
Well, if they're using it and for whatever they're using it for, and they can't stop using it, yeah, that's probably a dependency, if anything.
Yeah, if you got to leave reality right when you wake up through the day, even if you can go to work, because that's how some people rationalize it. Look, I go to work, I'm a productive person, but it's like, dude, it'll eventually catch up with you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, on that level, someone needing it to cope, if that's their go-to mechanism to cope, then to me that eventually is problematic, and it will continue to be problematic. And there's a whole big discussion on THC, and THC, right, is not the same level of THC content that it was many years ago. I mean, you got a lot of things in it. You have wax and dabs, which is highly concentrated THC. It can block medications from working appropriately. I mean, and research has shown now that young kids, elementary or teen, they can smoke marijuana, and their high can last a week longer than a typical adult. And so they're high. So if there's, let's say, smoke of the weekend, chances are that high effect is lasting throughout a whole week. And so that's what happens. And they've shown research that kids who smoke chronically in a problem way is it's lowering IQ points by 12 points or more. And they're more prone to behavioral issues, educational issues, and legal issues as well. And so, because the brain's still developing, and so it's a really big issue. It's in the form of vaping, and of course THC can have fentanyl in it. So it's a really, really tough thing. But there's some adults that can smoke it and not be problematic. And so, but like I said, if you have those risk factors in place, the chances of it becoming a bigger problem, if you don't have anything else in place, you're not using any healthy coping mechanisms or anything like that, that's when you start opening the door for bigger problems.
That's crazy, dude. I didn't know they'd be high for a week.
They can be.
Oh my God.
They don't metabolize it, process it like an adult. And so, yeah, these kids, and you have kids that are smoking it every day. And so it can really impact a lot of cognitive abilities and all kinds of different things.
Yeah, I heard that not you, but a person's probability of developing psychosis increases significantly if you abused THC in your adolescence.
Well, we are seeing a lot more what we call marijuana-induced psychosis, that people are smoking so much marijuana now that it's inducing psychotic episodes. Psychosis meaning a detachment from reality, which can be a form of a hallucination, delusion, dissociation, disorganized thinking. So you're seeing, even in adults, you're seeing them because whether it be they're just smoking so much of it or they're smoking high concentrates of THC, or it's confounding pre-existing mental health conditions. And so we're seeing, and it used to be back in the day in treatment, if you showed up to treatment 30 years ago, oh, my drug of choice is marijuana, you'd probably get laughed at. But nowadays, that's their drug of choice for some people. That's it, THC. And so they're presenting as that being their main drug of choice. And is it the gateway drug? No, it's not the gateway drug, but it is a gateway drug, meaning that it will be a gateway to other substances. And that's usually where people start off, especially now it's legal, and they graduate to something else because it's no longer having the effect, or the people that are surrounding themselves experiment. So, I mean, alcohol can be a gateway drug, meaning it opens a door to other things.
Yeah, I don't know, no data on this, but I'm pretty sure people don't go straight to crack. Like they've dabbled in getting high, got comfortable with the idea, I think got into harder, right? Because I know people always knock that. It's not a gateway, but I like how you said that. It is a gateway drug, but the route to drug addiction usually starts there.
It can start there because it's, for now, like I said, because it's legal, it's sort of looked at as the more mild level of a substance. And but it's, people, it's the escape, it's the high that when they get to that point, it's not usually the drug of choice, it's that high, right? You can tell someone if they can eat a napkin, if they're going to get high, if that's what they're looking for, the problem, they'll eat that napkin. So it's a big issue, and then we have to recognize and definitely put on the map, especially for younger kids and teens.
Yeah, and what sucks is our society, the culture, like just the entertainment industry.
Yeah,
they they absolutely glorify it, and they make it a point now. Like it's weird if you look at music artists, especially rappers, which is, I think rap's like the most popular music in the world right now, genre. And a lot of the rappers, they want to make it a point of you seeing them smoke.
Yeah.
They're like, even during interviews, like, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's such a childish, rebellious thing. You don't see, like, I think they would do the same thing. Say if alcohol was illegal, they'd be like pouring vodka. It's like, why do you have to showcase that? Who does that during an interview? You can't not smoke or roll a joint for whatever the link to this interview is, but it seems like they want you to know that this is cool and I'm in it.
Especially nowadays that it's legal, there's probably a lot of benefits to promoting.
With like the image, or are you talking about monetary, like
the image,
sponsor?
The product, or what have you? I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly whether it be cultural or what have you, but
yeah, no. I mean, I just mean in the sense the influence on young kids. Like they make it a point to do that, so kids are seeing that. Like, I want to be like Snoop Dogg, and then next thing you know, they're trying to mimic it and smoke every day or smoke the strongest stuff because that's they always brag about. Like, is this is this strong or is this gas? That's
that's one of my beliefs is that if you're granted that ability to be high level and exposure is you have a responsibility of the messages you're putting out there. Yeah, some people say, "Oh, I'm not responsible for your kids, and you got to take care of your kids." But to me, if I was on that level of stage, you have a responsibility, I think, for sending out positive messages out there. And you're right, to me that kids are influential, right?
Yeah, no, adults are.
Adults are. Yeah.
I'll leave it at this: is that think about this. Entertainment influences fashion, language, everything, even jokes. Like you might see some guy joke a certain way, like and it might influence you because you liked how that person joked in the movie or how they dressed. You remember there was a time where Friends was big, the TV show, then all these women had Jennifer Aniston haircuts.
Yep.
Those were adults. Those weren't kids.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the influence. What if she was a pothead and she glorified it?
Yeah.
There definitely would have been an influence there. You know?
Oh, it does. It does.
Yeah. So when they say, it takes a community, that is our community. They're getting piped right into our homes. So it becomes a part of our community.
Yeah.
So I think that's, what do you call it? A deflection of responsibility or diffusion of responsibility. But yeah, we're all at the end of the day influencing each other one way or another. And if you don't believe that, just look at politics. We're split down the line on Democrat and Republican. But we have over 350 million people. You're trying to say everyone's on one side or the other. There's no nuances. Yeah. You could literally do a survey on anything else. What do you think about grilled cheese sandwiches? You get so many answers. Yeah. But for some reason, the way what's being pumped in our home, the two polarized sides, everyone's choosing, there's influence. There's influence.
Yeah.
And I think if you repeat something long enough, it goes from even being a concept to almost being reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, that's the whole part of advertising is you see something soon enough, you're going to believe it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the challenges with, social media has a lot of great stuff. People always say, oh, social media is bad. No, there's a lot of great stuff that can come from it. We just got to be mindful, just like the cell phone, just like the car. There's a lot of great stuff, but we have to be mindful of the other challenging stuff as well. And so, yes, the ease of information. When I talk about that dopamine release, where you get that rapid satisfaction, that immediate gratification, Amazon packages being delivered.
Talk about it. Hit me up. Right now I'm starting to fiend. I need something delivered at my house.
Exactly. And it's changed our brain chemistry and what we expect and that immediate validation and gratification. We talked about validation earlier. Man, whether it be on certain medias, we're looking for that. I've had clients on social media back in the years, they post something. Oh my God, that person didn't like it. I sent it to them, and they really were in distress. And we grew up in a culture where the number of followers you have, there's payoffs for that. Right? Were you that person?
No. You just reminded me. I used to be a teacher in the early 2000s. Yeah. Fights used to happen at the school, right? Over you remember MySpace, and you had a top 8.
I wasn't on MySpace.
Okay, MySpace, you had friends.
Yeah.
But there's a top 8. These are your 8 most favorite people.
Wow.
Say if you got replaced by, I'm not your top 8. I'm talking wars would break out, dude.
Yeah, and you're seeing that. If you get ghosted from someone or if you get unfollowed, it really is devastating on many levels. Yeah, and so.
It's funny. Yeah, it's just funny to me because it's, as adults, when this first came out, I remember telling younger people, dude, you serious? It's on the computer. It's not even real life. You're not even saying, but now it's bled into adult stuff.
You see all these things. I'm new on social media as of 2 months ago, and now you see all these videos of adults posting and stuff. And so, you just go anywhere you go. You get older people. My parents are one of those they're on their phones and so it's awesome. It's a major cultural shift for us, but it's not all bad. But we have to be mindful.
I got to tell you one thing real quick because I came across this morning, and then we'll wrap. But there's a woman. She's on TikTok. She went viral. She filmed herself making cupcakes while crying. Right, like crying, dude. And she put words at the top that stay, not subtitle, just words, because they're just sad music. She's making cupcakes for myself on my birthday so that my children could wish me a happy birthday or something.
She went viral?
Yeah, that went viral. People felt sorry for her. But then people started commenting she's obviously in a very expensive home, right? Yeah. How much of a struggle can you have, right? And the other people are like, why didn't you just buy a cake? Why or cupcakes, right? And then her ex-husband saw that, and because he got backlash because people knew they were married. You left her like that, and so what he did was he made a response, and he put up their divorce papers on the freaking TikTok. He has full custody of the kids all year round. She had him removed because she has a criminal record and she went to prison
got it.
and all this. He exposed her, but I'm like, They're literally feuding this out in public like that.
Yeah.
Like the whole world. I'm talking, these videos are getting millions of likes, which means they're probably in the tens of millions of views. And it's just, this morning, I was just thinking like, holy crap, man. Like, this would have never happened. That little spat would have occurred among friends and family. The whole world's seeing it. Now that woman, she made her profile private.
Yeah.
Because she got embarrassed because she threw out a sympathy thing, which she doesn't have her kids.
Yeah.
And that's why they weren't there when she was making cupcakes.
You're seeing a lot of that. You're seeing speaking of those revenge videos, there was this female who was cheated by her husband, and he was this person that had all these secret stuff, and she revealed all the secrets on TikTok. And there's another doctor who was let go of a hospital, and she revealed all the stuff that the hospital didn't want people to know. And so there's a lot of these revenge TikToks out there.
Yeah.
Or not TikToks, but social media videos. And then you get people who are just making content, forcing content. And so, like for me, my personal responsibility is be impactful with information out there that people can better themselves with.
So we're not going to see you do like a revenge video to someone on there one day? But like Kenny, man, and just like
Kenny, let me tell you the real Kenny.
He made all that up. This guy's he's actually a billionaire, and he lives a beachfront mansion. Yeah, cool, man. Well, hey, again, thanks for coming out. You're Dr. Brian Licuanan, which is Licuanan, right? How to get your resisting loved one into treatment. I recommend going out, guys, to Amazon. Check it out. Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. There's a link in the podcast description that will also have a link to it also. It's very good. And it's a step-by-step guide. And I'm pretty sure, even if it's not just for treatment, maybe even trying to just convince someone to make a change in their life, this probably could be used.
Or to get help.
Or to get help.
Whatever help that is.
Yeah, whatever help that is. All right, well, hey, man, thanks for coming out. I appreciate it.
Thank you, always.
Yeah, definitely, man. And I guess I'll see you. Are you training tomorrow?
No, I'm preparing for the Wednesday tournament. So I got days off Monday and Tuesday.
Well, I train all the time, man. So I wish I had, I'm everyday pojada. You know what I'm saying?
I guess.
I'm kidding. All right. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Good to see you.
Good to see you.